Hey, can we sit back down? Guys?
Right. We're in a hurry to get done now, guys.
You put donuts on whatever.
You can have donuts, just stop talking, that's fine.
Lunch quietly.
Burritos.
So we've got our superstar at the table. So Ian, you want to take us into the audit?
Yes, I would love to. Thank you. There's a memo that starts on page 198 of the packet, if you would like to follow along. We do have an action item in front of you all today. Staff requests that the board formally accept the audit for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2025. I did want to call out a couple mistakes in my memo. First of all, I think I said that Nick Graham was going to be presenting the audit. That is not true. Many of you will recognize Matt Miller on the screen. He will be presenting the audit to us today. The other mistake in my memo was about the single audit. The threshold for the single audit has increased from $750,000 to $1 million. So it is now $1 million as of, I think, for fiscal years ending December 31st, 2025 or later. Those are the mistakes in my memo. I just wanted to point those out first.
But to be clear, Ian, we don't need a single audit
Nope.
either way for 2025.
That's correct.
Because we did not receive $750,000 or $1 million in federal
Correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So the statute requires the district to file an audit, to complete and file an audit every year by the 31st of July. We just discussed this year, there was no single audit. That is when the district receives or expends in excess of $1 million. So no single audit for 2025. A reminder is that the auditors work for you all. They do not work for district management. We sent out requests for proposals last year and we only got one back. It was from a firm on the Front Range and it was 60% higher than the bid from McMahon. So if you recall at the October meeting, you all decided to retain McMahon again for this year. And their proximity to Glenwood, they're in Avon. Their proximity to Glenwood and their familiarity with the district really enabled them to produce the lowest bid. At the suggestion of Vice President Richard, the district did request a new in-charge auditor this year to get a fresh perspective. And that was Nick Graham. He did the audit, but Matt Miller will be presenting the audit. They were here in late March with three auditors for a few days. They reviewed transactions in more detail, met with district management, and reviewed our internal controls that we have established. So I'm pleased to report that the district has received another clean audit this year. And with that, I'll introduce Matt and let Matt take it from here. This is Matt Miller with McMahon. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Ian. Thank you. So like Ian said, my name is Matt Miller and I'm a CPA and one of the partners with McMahon and Associates. So we've been your auditor, I believe, for about 6 years now. And like Ian said, we're based out of Avon, so we're at least close by. And the ultimate purpose of the audit is to issue an opinion on your financial statements. And in order to be able to do that, we break the audit process down into three main parts. So you have planning, fieldwork, and then reporting. So before anything ever happens, Ian uploads a bunch of files to us through what's called an engagement organizer. So it's both a secure file transfer portal and also a request list. And then the team sets out and starts with planning. And so planning is really determining what we're going to do during fieldwork. And planning is broken down into kind of three main things. The first is gaining an understanding of the entity. So what happened this year? We read your meeting minutes. We would compare budget to actual. We would compare your budget to previous years. And that gives us kind of a general idea of what activities happened during the beginning of the year. The second part of that is to gain an understanding of your internal controls. So like Ian said, we spend time with your staff to discuss every major transaction cycle. So cash disbursements, cash receipts, payroll, who's involved in each one of those, and then where are the kind of key segregation of duties. So we would identify key controls as it relates to accounting standards. So what accounting standards say you should have. And then the second aspect of that would be to test district policies. So if you have a policy that says, a transaction over a certain threshold, these three things need to happen, we're going to make sure that we select transactions that fall within every category to confirm that what you say is happening or what you expect to be happening is actually happening. And then the final part of planning is what we call data analytics. So we actually take entire databases of your transactions and we put it into our data analytics software. And then we run various tests on that. That will help us identify if you had transactions with, say, a high risk vendor, if you had a significant amount of transactions with a certain vendor, or if anything just kind of falls out of kind of the normal course of business. And that really allows us to design the fieldwork procedures. And so, like Ian said, you requested a new manager this year, and that was Nick. You actually had an entirely new audit team this year. And so Nick is one of the managers that has been here for over 20 years. And so they did design the fieldwork a little bit differently this year. So I think fieldwork is what people think of as actual audit work. That's when we're digging through the numbers, pulling invoices, and kind of ticking and tying the details. We independently confirm with the bank that what you said was there was actually there. And once we're done with field work, we work with Ian on the actual financial statements. So if we move to the report itself, there's a couple of things I like to highlight first. The first thing is that you prepare more than what is required. So the state of Colorado requires that you prepare what's called basic financial statements, and you actually prepare quite a bit more than that. Your report includes a transmittal letter, your management's discussion and analysis kind of goes above and beyond what's required, and then you do include some additional supplementary information. And then I always like to highlight that Ian prepares this report. Generally speaking, if you look at, governments around the state, we work with several hundred governments, and it's very few of them actually produce their own report. For the most part, any report that you're reviewing generally comes from the auditors. And so Ian actually prepares this himself, so I like to give him credit there. So a few highlights from your report itself. You received what's called an unmodified audit opinion. That's a clean audit opinion on your financial statements. That's exactly what you're looking for. If we do a few financial highlights here, you ended the year with $124 million in total net position. So that's your governmental funds and your business type funds. That's up 7 million from last year. Your governmental assets were about 53.6 million. And so that's a 14% increase year over year. And if we highlight kind of the specific reasons for those increases, your funds are broken down into governmental funds and then business type funds. So governmental is probably what you're most familiar with seeing. That's your general fund. The community partnership fund is there as well. And so ultimately you had a little over a $6 million net income in your governmental funds specifically. That's really the main driver of that $7 million increase. Ultimately, most of that was realized in your general fund, but then transferred to the community funding partnership fund. Let's see. And so your governmental funds all reported positive fund balance. And ultimately, I would say, you have significant reserves for kind of future spending. That community funding partnership fund has a little under $21 million in it now. So pretty significant increase year over year. Again, driven specifically by the property tax collections. So following the financial statements, you have the footnotes to the financial statements. And so the footnotes really serve kind of two purposes. The first part of that is to detail your significant accounting policies. So what kind of cash and investments are you allowed to have? What do you consider to be a capital asset and how do you depreciate that? And then the second part of the footnotes gives you details on what's actually in your financial statements. So what kind of cash and investments did you have? There's details on the maturities there, and then some more information on your capital asset activity for the year. And then the final part gives you information on um, the joint ventures that you have, any kind of water purchasing contracts. And then you have the required supplementary information. And so that is the budget to actual presentation for most of your governmental funds. So what did you plan on happening versus what actually happened? And then the final part is the supplementary information, which is some additional items that Ian likes to provide. So I'm happy to answer any questions on the financial statements themselves. Otherwise, I do have a governing board letter to go through.
I do want to take a moment just to remind the board, McMahon and Associates is hired by the board and works directly for you. It's the way that you make sure that what we're telling you about our management of the taxpayers' money is accurate and precise. And so this is one of your opportunities to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing here.
Scott?
So I have a couple of questions. One on the joint ventures. So in the joint ventures, you came up on an approximate value of about $2.5 million, something close to that. How'd you come up with that number? And do we have board representation with Eagle? It's called Eagle Park Reservoir Company. Do we have somebody on that board, or do we have?
We have Peter Fleming as a board member on the Eagle Park Reservoir Company.
Okay, and how did we come up with, do we have about $2.5 million in there? Oh, that's the investment value. We don't have cash.
No, that's the value of the shares that we own, which is we're the minority owner in that reservoir company.
That's correct. And the Eagle Park Reservoir Company investment specifically does not change. That's valued at basically the historical cost. So the money that you put in.
That's the water we have in our Eagle River supplies.
Yeah, the paragraph explains all that. I just wondered how the valuation and if we attend the meeting. Then the other one was, I was a little confused, ironically, on the same page of the audit. On the home ownership benefit we have for our employees. We have a doubtful, let's see, loss recovery.
It's called an allowance of doubtful accounts.
$180,000, which is more than we've got out, I guess. Kind of explain that for me. I would be on page 48 of 55. My question would be, the balance of the note receivable is 144,000
Net.
net of a doubtful accounts. Do we have any doubtful accounts in existence?
Well, what that doubtful accounts
Okay.
is the forgiveness.
Well, no, I know what a doubtful account is. So
Well, so the employee home ownership program,
after 15 years.
after five,
Every 5 years.
every 5 years, they'll relieve a percentage of that loan up to 3 times. So you're thinking about 15 years is after 15 years, the loan from my own loan is due. The remaining balance that was not forgiven is due. So when an employee takes a loan out, we have an interview with them and we say, how long are you gonna hang around for? I've always heard 15 years. Nobody's ever told me different. When they tell me that, then I record that allowance. Okay, so I move that from the receivable
I
allowance.
see, okay.
Okay, so the receivable is truly both of them currently, but whenever an employee gets a relief, that allowance decreases. Okay, so if nobody else took out any loans from here for the next 15 years, in 15 years, that allowance would be 0. You understand? Does that make sense?
One final question.
Sure.
if I can. So was there anything flagged or is there any improvement suggestions from the audit that came in like a management letter or anything saying, you might want to look at this, or you might want to handle it this way?
Yes, there was one thing that came in, on a communication letter that talked about, payables. And we had a discrepancy of like $11,000 on the payable aging schedule. So it shows you, you haven't paid this invoice in the 0 to 30, then it moves over 30 to 60. When you compare that schedule to the general ledger, there was a difference of 11,000 or so because of a date issue. What happened was the check got cut the day before the invoice date. So the check was cut before the even invoice got
So that
recorded.
was any long-term?
No, I'll let Matt answer that question.
Yeah, so that's more or less a timing difference. And so like everybody has said, we work for you as the board. And so we do issue what's called a board communication letter as part of the audit. And that's more or less a report card directly to you as board members for how the actual audit process went. The board letter is just 2 pages long, so it's nice and short, which means we didn't have a lot to communicate. Most of what's in there is information that we're required to highlight. So if we start with kind of the first part of that board letter, it represents what's called qualitative aspects of accounting policy, and that's just what's behind the numbers. So the first part of that would be accounting standards. You didn't adopt any new accounting standards this year, so nothing specific to report there. The second part are significant estimates that are in your financial statements. So estimates are controlled essentially by management, although you follow general industry practices, but your 3 main estimates. The first one, as we just discussed, is related to the allowance for uncollectible receivables. Like Ian said, you have certain receivables that, are separate from those employee housing plans, but you're also essentially estimating how long people are going to stay. The second one is how you're depreciating your capital assets. So you follow industry standards, but the useful life that you apply to those assets is technically still an estimate. And then the final one is related to the accrued sick leave. Historically, what you've recorded is just termination payout items, so something that's guaranteed to be paid out. But new accounting standards over the last few years require that anything that accrues, we have to estimate what's likely to be used. To highlight any difficulties encountered in performing the audit, we're happy to report that we did not have any. Ian was prepared well in advance of the actual scheduled audit week. Everything was uploaded to us, and we had no difficulties getting through the actual fieldwork. They had everything that we requested, which is important. The next part of that is corrected and uncorrected misstatements. And so we're happy to report that nothing that we identified as part of the audit procedures was what we would call a material adjustment. If you had a material adjustment, you would see them specifically listed here. And that's important as board members because that means that the information that you make decisions on is accurate. The information that you already used to prepare your 2026 budget and that you've been operating on for more than half a year is accurate. So that's really important. You don't want us to come in here and record a $6 million journal entry and all of a sudden that net income that you had goes away. Disagreements with management, we did not have any. There is a new accounting standard that's effective for next year, so we'll make sure to work with Ian specifically on that. The important item to take away, I guess, from that is that it does not change your day-to-day operations. The new accounting standard is strictly limited to the presentation on your financial statements. So it will change that management's discussion and analysis, what's reported in your required supplementary information. And then there's a few new categories on the statement of activities for your proprietary fund. And then the last part is the recommendation from us. And so this is a pretty small recommendation. But like Ian said, there was essentially a difference between the subledger and the trial balance that was provided for one invoice. And the board letter actually lists that it was 6,000. So a little bit less than that 11,000. But basically, if the subledger gets off, the reason that we would report that and recommend that you look at that is because that can be a recurring issue. If there's a journal entry that's made directly to an account with a subledger, and then nothing is ever done to connect that journal entry to an actual vendor or something like that, this can be a perpetual problem. So it would never go away unless you identify it. And so that's the specific reason that we've highlighted it.
Thank you.
So that's all I have, unless anybody else has any questions for me.
Seeing none, we need a motion to accept. Yes, to accept the audit. Need a motion.
Hazard move.
Moves. Second, Rover. All of those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passed. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do want to just take a minute to thank McMahon and Associates. They conducted the audit. It was, they do send their field crew out, and sometimes those audits can have the potential to be somewhat invasive and disturbing to an organization. They did a great job, and they have every time they've shown up. We communicate with them. They're very clear. They're very professional. We appreciate that. I also want to thank Ian. This is what we were talking about yesterday during his 15-year anniversary of recognition. It is really impressive that a very small accounting operation, Ian was solo by himself here for a few months this year, and I did a great job. He really does a remarkable job keeping track of all of our funds and has a mastery of it in a way that makes my job a lot easier and also your job a lot easier to get these main audits is really impressive. So thank you.
I would echo that, Andy. Thank you. It's a small team, but both Andy and Audrey play a big role in that with their review of checks every week. So thank you guys for your work as well. It's a team effort. So appreciate you guys. Appreciate you, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got a presentation by Lynn Baker.
While she gets her computer set up, I just wanted to give a little context. We invited Maddie to come and present on aquatic nuisance species. Maddie is with the CPW. She's an invasive species specialist. For a little context, there's kind of two thoughts on why we wanted her to come speak about this. One is a direct impact to our own infrastructure. Wolford and Elkhead, we have A&S programs there. Boats are inspected, they're decontaminated if need be. Those are fallible programs. They are not perfect, so it mitigates the risk, but there's still some risk to our infrastructure there. And then secondly, is just the broader risk to our constituents. There's an immense ecological risk associated with the A&S species and also risk to all of the water infrastructure on the western shore.
Well, thanks for that introduction, Hunter.
You need one more time?
Oh, no, that's okay. I can start rambling while I share my screen here. But yeah, so Hunter did a good job of sort of summing up what the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Species Program does. We have been a preventative program for the introduction of invasive mussels and other invasive species since about 2008. We have recently sort of switched into the mode of more containment, particularly in the Grand Valley area and in the Colorado River Basin. But we do still operate in a preventative way at our reservoirs and other locations that are mussel free. So with that, just making sure that my screen is going to go ahead and share here. Looks good on my screen. Okay, there we go. All right. So just a quick update. This is not necessarily to serve to tell you guys why mussels are bad. I think it's a safe assumption to know that most people in this room know why mussels are bad. And if not, find me later and I'll talk your ear off about it for as long as you'll let me. But this is just to serve more as an update. So our program is made up now of 9 full-time employees. When I first came on in 2022, 6 whole days after we found zebra mussels in Highline Lake for the very first time, there were 3 of us. So we have had the good fortune to expand our capacity to perform this work a lot over the last few years. So just wanted to highlight some of the scope of our program. Our program manager, my supervisor, Robert Walters, is the chair of the Western Regional Panel on Invasive Species, where over 16 Western states come together and talk about how we handle these issues and sort of apply our programs consistently all across the West, including lots of working groups in state, like the Colorado River District, the Colorado A&S Task Force, and many, many more. So I'm going to pick up around this time last year. Again, if you want a bigger history of how this sort of all started in the fall of 2022, find me, but with the limited time that I have, I'm going to start from last year. So in 2025, this was the first year that we were able to implement our Western Slope-based sampling crew. Previously, this had just been a crew based out of Denver that spent as much time driving as they did sampling to get everywhere in Colorado from Denver. So in 2025, when we got more boots on the ground, we very quickly discovered more things going on. So at the conclusion of the 2024 sampling season, the furthest point upstream that we had found veligers of any life stage was in Debec, in the Colorado River, and those were just veligers, which are the microscopic juvenile life stage. In 2025, we expanded the amount of river miles that we knew to be infested pretty significantly when we started finding veligers around the Newcastle area. I do want to point out that anytime we do detect these juvenile veligers in the Colorado River, it's always within about a 2-week window. So that just really highlights for us the importance of getting out there very frequently, because if we were only sampling once a month, we could have missed that big 2-week spawning event. So we have found this to be pretty consistent, somewhere June, early July, and a 2-week window that we are finding these veligers. The finding of veligers in 2025 did prompt us to look at some off-channel bodies of water that might have connectivity to the Colorado River, which is what led us to discover currently the furthest upstream location known for zebra mussels, which is at a privately owned body of water in western Eagle County, and that's a specific information about that. All to say, we found a lot of adults, a lot of veligers. There's a little bit of a lag time in between when I switch my slide and it comes up on the TV. So there we go. So what you're seeing underneath the microscope, those little white dots with the cross through them are all veligers. So this is evidence of a reproducing population. We were able to completely isolate this body of water from the Colorado River. There were a few culverts like the one shown that were half-heartedly attempted at being sealed off, but a grinding disc with a rock in front of it doesn't really do the job. So those culverts were actually removed from the earth entirely and packed in with earth. We did dye tests within the lake to be absolutely sure that no water was seeping from the lake into the river. And then in August of last year, we were able to conduct an application of a molluscicide, EarthTech QZ. This is an EPA-approved copper-based liquid molluscicide. So knowing that we had that body of water isolated, we were able to apply that molluscicide last year per the Western Regional Standard Protocol for delisting bodies of water. It will take 5 years of ongoing sampling for that to be completely delisted and for us to say, we did it, we eradicated mussels in this body of water. So that is our hope. This is a ground-fed body of water, so we're hoping that by isolating it from any downstream movement, that body of water is just completely self-contained now. The nice thing about applying in August is that the water temperature was very high. The mussels were very metabolically active, so we did see a very promising initial response of mussels dying very quickly. So all of those mussels you see attached to rocks, their shells are open, their body is gone. That is basically just the skeleton of mussels. So those are how we sort of confirm that those are dead. We have been continuing to monitor this body of water into this year, and so far have not had any positive findings of any living mussels there. There are still going to be some dead remnants, but at this point, we have not found any living viable adults or villagers. So we're chipping away at that 5 years of negative sampling to hopefully delist this particular body of water. That doesn't mean that we're not continuing to sample. We are sampling all the way from the headwaters of the Colorado River to the Utah line, as well as tributaries of the Colorado River. Our program has always had a really robust sampling program for reservoirs, particularly potable reservoirs. So we are expanding more now into moving bodies of water. But as of right now, this sort of covers our sampling on the Colorado River, totally top to bottom as far as it goes in Colorado. We have not detected veligers of any life stage in any of the tributaries. So no mussels in the Eagle or Roaring Fork rivers or any river but the Colorado River and canals that feed from the Colorado River. We are also analyzing our samples, not only for the presence of those microscopic veligers, but they are also going through PCR and being analyzed for the presence of DNA. Their DNA alone is not enough to constitute a finding by our standards, but it is kind of the smoke alarm that goes off and tells us maybe we need to be looking a little bit closer in an area. So here on the next slide, when that switches over, this will be a list of every known infestation that we currently are aware of in Colorado. All of them are within the Colorado River's hydrologic system. So the good news, at least, is that human traffic has not transported any of these mussels outside of the hydrological system that we found them within. New findings this year include the Grand River Park Pond, which is managed by the town of Newcastle. To our knowledge, there is no surface recreation here. It is just for fishing and for irrigation retention for their sprinkler system over there. We have been working closely with the town of Newcastle on just closely surveying any of their raw water infrastructure and making sure that there are no obstructions from the mussels to their infrastructure. We have also detected both adult and veliger mussels within the Canyon View Park ponds in Grand Junction, for those who might be familiar. Again, I don't think really any swimming or surface water recreation is allowed. These have just been infested by the source of their water from the Colorado River. And then we did find mussels for the first time officially in the Old Sugar Mesa Irrigation District Canal, which again pulls from the Colorado River around the Palisade area. So to this day, the furthest point upstream that we know these mussels to be is that privately owned body of water in Eagle County. That being said, we are trying to expand our efforts even further to sample more privately owned bodies of water. This can only happen with the permission of the landowner and manager of that body of water. We get told no all the time, so be it, that is your right. But we just want to make sure that people are aware that this is not something that we are muscling our way into. Sorry, had to do it. But yeah, so we cannot force our way into sampling anybody's privately owned body of water. And if they do allow us to sample and we do find mussels and they say that's cool, we don't want you to do anything about it, that is also their right. We cannot force that either. So doing our best to sort of work with these privately owned landowners so that we can understand potential impacts to their irrigation systems and raw water systems and sort of help them mitigate it if they want the help, and if not, that is their prerogative. So every yellow tack that you see is a privately owned body of water that we have flagged as a high priority for sampling in the Grand Valley area. That is not inclusive of the Roaring Fork Valley or other infested stretches of the Colorado River. So just a little bit of work to do when it comes to that. And half the battle is just convincing people to let us. So still working on that. Still lots of work to be done. I did want to share just a little bit of information about how we are running our containment program at Highline Lake State Park, where we very first found these mussels. We have been working really closely with the Army Corps of Engineers in a 65-35 cost sharing program to fund a $1.3 million boat hot tub. It's a warm pool of water held anywhere from 105 to 110 degrees that you back your boat into. So instead of having a boat inspector crawl underneath with basically a toilet plunger and flushing out all of those internal compartments for an hour or more. This decontamination can be completed in somewhere between 10 to 15 minutes is our hope. So this is just a way for us to improve the user experience at Highline Lake, try to decrease wait times and still let people have a good time and not have to worry about waiting in a line for several hours just to leave the body of water. So Highline Lake is decontaminating every single motorized boat that touches that water every single time it touches it before they leave the property. Our decontaminations consist of hot water and hot water only. No soaps, bleaches, or chemicals are required. Just hot water is enough to kill the mussels. So $1.4 million boat, hot tub, in addition to just a vastly increased water usage and staff time to perform all of these decontaminations. Mac Mesa Lake is also on Highline Lake State Park. It is smaller. It allows non-motorized use and fishing. So we also have several self-serve cleaning stations for the public to use there. And they cannot use any craft on that lake outside of ANS inspection hours, so all of those are still getting inspected and decontaminated by our staff there. at
Lower the
Highline.
boats into the hot tub
Yeah, so on the trailer, just back it in like you're launching it into the lake.
and then you run the engine so it goes through all the.
Yes, yeah, and this is designed for more complex boats that have ballasts and things too, so you can fill all your ballasts, run your engine all simultaneously, and then all of those interior compartments are getting flushed with hot water. Then dump it back out. It's got a filtration system that filters the entire volume of the pool, which is about 8,000 gallons every hour. So,
Wow.
a lot of infrastructure went into that.
Wow.
So beyond Highline Lake, we've also expanded our containment and added a few other preventative efforts, including at Kenny Reservoir. This is our first hybrid station where we are inspecting both boats launching at Kenny Reservoir itself, as well as requiring any watercraft that are passing by the station to pull over and receive an inspection or decontamination. This is our first sort of preventative effort for the White River Basin in Rio Blanco County. So we're really happy to have expanded up there. Thanks to Alden for making that go super easy and paving the way. It's been.
Well, it worked together. We worked together on that. It wasn't a singular effort, so thank you.
It's been a dream either way. It's been very easy. And then we have also added a roadside checkpoint on the Grand Mesa. One of our big partners, U Water, uses obviously a lot of water on the Grand Mesa for water in the Grand Valley. And with no protections up there and the amount of lakes that they have and recreation, we figured that the best way to sort of tackle that risk of any folks moving non-motorized watercraft between the Colorado River and the Grand Mesa Lakes was roadside inspection stations. So we could just catch everyone rather than trying to figure out which one of the 300 lakes has the most people going to it. So we are doing inspections on the Grand Mesa. We started on the south side access of the Mesa, but are now on the north end access just to kind of see who's getting the most traffic, what kind of watercraft, what their boating history is, and just sort of get a sense for what the true risk really is of movement of mussels onto the Grand Mesa. We also have a really robust education and outreach program. We have been working a little bit with River Science and River Watch to get technicians out there that are doing a combination of public education and outreach, just being at well-used boat ramps, talking to people, seeing if they're aware that the place that they just boated has zebra mussels and do they know how to clean their craft and make sure that they are not moving them around in any way. There's been a lot of attention that's been directed towards non-motorized traffic, particularly since we started finding mussels in the Colorado River, which is primarily used by non-motorized boaters. So we have been getting cleaning stations out. I have many more cleaning stations, more like the one on the post with a little concrete slab that has some pull tools and some educational signage. So if you know somewhere that could benefit from a cleaning station, please let me know. I'm trying to get rid of them. They're taking up space in my office. So let me know and we would be happy to sort of supply these cleaning stations. The only upkeep is really just making sure that they don't get vandalized. That's about it. They're pretty self-sufficient, but we've been making a lot of face-to-face contacts with boaters, distributing boot brushes and towels and stickers and pamphlets and educational materials to all these people so that they know exactly how they can do their part by simply not making it worse, and not spreading these around. So, once my slide takes its time and switches, I will just say it's always nice to kind of zoom out a little bit and remember that this mussel infestation is affecting only a small part of Colorado, and the rest of the state is still operating in a preventative manner. So our program has always been a prevention program. We're just learning about what it's actually like to live with these mussels. So that circle is the stretch of the Colorado River that is infested, but just know that the rest of the state is still successfully preventing the introduction. Every green dot that you see is a location that we have a watercraft inspection station that is staffed during the boating season that is mussel free. So I like to just zoom out and remember that it's not all gone. You're still the vast majority of the state. California has recently beat us out with the presence of golden mussels. They really increased their inspection program. But before they did that, we were doing the most watercraft inspections and decontaminations that any state in the country was doing. So shout out to California for taking golden mussels very seriously and ramping up the program quite a lot. But just wanted to sort of show you guys the scale of our effort here. It's pretty uncommon for any state to do as many as 450,000 watercraft inspections annually. We are continuing also to expand our protections by way of roadside checkpoints. In 2024, we launched roadside inspection stations at Loma and Trinidad ports of entry coming into the state. In 2025, we added Fort Morgan and Lyman ports of entry to add protections to our eastern border for mussel-infested craft coming from the east. And then this year we did also add the Cortez port of entry near the Four Corners area, which also gets a lot of traffic to and from Lake Powell, which is famously infested with quagga mussels, not zebra mussels. So we have zebra mussels, Lake Powell has quagga mussels. Cannot blame this one on Lake Powell. I just have to put that out there. As much as I like to shake my fist at them, they are out there doing their best, and this is certainly not their fault. So the Loma port of entry last year did intercept 57 mussel-fouled watercraft out of about 110 that the entire state intercepted. So they have been a really key location for just watercraft moving between Colorado and Lake Powell. So we're optimistic about this, and we will continue to expand these by way of adding more locations, but also maybe expanding our inspection hours to get people that might be traveling during the nighttime. And I know this year in Grand Junction with the winter we had, there are also a lot of people going to and from Powell all winter long. So we're starting to think about expanding the length of our season as well to sort of accommodate those fair weather boaters that are just going to Lake Powell because it's always nice.
With us being upstream of Powell, are we expecting that we're gonna make its way down?
I mean, theoretically, what is upstream will eventually go downstream. We have been working with our federal partners who don't have to do a mountain of paperwork to cross state lines to kind of help us with sampling the Colorado River on the Utah border. And so far, no sign of villagers or adults to our knowledge downstream, but I think it's fair to say that it's gonna get there eventually. And I know a lot of Utah's concerns around that, because people say, what's the big deal? They already have quagga mussels at Lake Powell, but what's between us and Lake Powell? I think there's several hydroelectric facilities that use Colorado River water, so they still don't want those to be affected by us and our germs. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that it could happen. Hasn't yet been. Yes.
Maddie, is it just the mussels you're looking for, or what else is there other things you're looking for as well when you're doing your inspections?
Yeah, oh yeah, watercraft inspections, we're looking for anything. So New Zealand mud snails are a population that's really heavy on our radar that our sampling crew is searching for, as well as our watercraft inspectors when they're in the field. Invasive plants like Eurasian water milfoil are big ones. We don't deal as much with fish. The way CPW is structured, a lot of invasive fish go to the fisheries biologists rather than the ANS program, but we do work closely with them if we do happen to see fish. So it's mostly invertebrates, zebra quagga and golden mussels, New Zealand mud snails, russet crayfish, and then invasive plants like Eurasian water milfoil. Yeah. Mussels are only one part.
May I have follow-up questions? If you do find a watercraft that does have some sort of contamination on it, what happens?
Depending on the severity, so typically we can decontaminate a watercraft with hot water and get them on the water the same day. If it's like a severely infested boat that's been moored at Lake Powell for a few years, that can take days, weeks, or months, depending on how nice the boat owner is. And just the complexity of their watercraft. Last year I had a situation where I had to rent a crane to lift a boat off of its trailer to scrape mussels off of it. So that was a couple months.
Who's responsible for that expense then?
The boat owner. It is their responsibility to know that it is illegal to transport these species across state lines. And typically when you moor your boat at Powell, which is how your boat gets that severely encrusted, you sign paperwork that acknowledges the requirement to get decontaminated before you leave Lake Powell.
So technically the state impounds the boat until they're satisfied.
Yes.
Is there any cooperation with CDOT to do anything like this? To do any of your inspections, or are you kind of on your own?
We operate at ports of entry that are largely operated by the Colorado State Patrol, so we've been working very closely with CSP on those operations and traffic management at the ports and things. Not quite so much with, you know, if somebody bypasses the port, there's not really a state trooper that's just gonna go get them real quick. But we're working on it. So, and part of our 9 full-time employees, we do have 2 fully commissioned rangers that can help us with that. One of the east.
So if I might, 2 questions. One, what was the size of the pond in Eagle that you had such success? Was this more of a lake or just?
Pretty small.
But big enough to launch a wakeboard.
Yes.
Big enough to see as you drive past it.
So
on
that
I-70.
process. Thank you, Peter. So that process,
You know.
if I can, just for a minute, that process that you deployed there, can you apply it to any larger facility, or because it was a small pond, it was? You could do that?
We're sort of working on a framework to start making recommendations for mitigation. It's not, I wouldn't say it's quite as dependent on the size of the body of water unless it's somewhere like Lake Granby and it's really huge. Most small-ish ponds, like something that would be privately owned by somebody, is typically within the size range that would be safe to treat. A lot of the question comes with where's the water coming from and going to? Can it be isolated? This chemical is reliant on a really long exposure time, so we need about 30 days of stagnation of that water where nothing is coming in or out. There's also concerns for recreational impacts. What kind of fish are in there? Are there native fish in there? That's a huge consideration. It's just complying with the Endangered Species Act and making sure that we're not harming any endangered native species. Is there a fishery there that people don't want affected in any way? What kind of use does that body of water have? So I think less about size and more about how you use it. Sorry.
The other thing is, so you drained Highline, which is a lake,
Yeah.
and the rumors I hear wasn't quite as successful as we'd hoped.
Yeah,
Is
I
that correct?
think
Tell me
that's a
about
fair-
Highline. Tell us about Highline.
I'll try to make it quick, so I'm not spending your guys' time, but first found them in the fall of 2022, did very extensive upstream sampling, did not find any evidence of mussels anywhere upstream, which is when we elected to treat with the same molluscicide that we used at this body of water, Earthtech QZ. The nice thing about Highline is it's canal fed, so outside of the irrigation season, it can be completely isolated. We took that time, applied molluscicide. This was by the spring of 2023. We did an IPM sort of approach where we did a partial drawdown of the reservoir to try to expose as many mussels as possible in freezing and drying conditions, and then applied molluscicide to the remaining water in there, allowed a long response time, lots of follow-up sampling, and then once irrigation season started again, we allowed the lake to completely fill and spill after knowing that the copper was within safe limits to go downstream. Continued monitoring, found more mussels that fall. So treatment in March, found more mussels October 1st. And at that time, that's when we elected to completely drain it. An application with this particular molluscicide had never been attempted in a lake that size in what's generally considered an open water system. So we just figured that there were other variables at play that didn't make it a successful eradication. We do consider it a successful population control measure, but that's not really what we were hoping for. We were hoping to eradicate. So after finding more, that's when we decided to eliminate all variables and just completely drain the reservoir. And then it was after that point that mussels were then detected upstream in the Colorado River and the canals that flow from the Colorado River. So it would have been great to know what we know now back then, but at the time we made the decision that we thought would be most effective to the information that we have. And I know that the public has a lot of feelings about that.
Kudos on your Loma. Hey, I've been out there.
Oh.
I think it's great. And I come from that direction fairly often. And every boat I ever see complies with the signage and pulls off.
They've gotten the highest compliance out of any port of entry in the
Well,
state, so.
maybe they have a couple state patrol cars. Maybe they just park them there. I don't know, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of compliance. So
They-
thank you.
They do a lot of speed traps kind of around there anyways, so it
Well,
helps.
I think that's the number one drug dealer in the state coming across there.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Maybe I'm just curious with drought in earlier seasons and people getting on water bodies early. What is CPW doing to kind of cover those shoulder seasons, especially in a year like this year? I know we had some problems in the Upper Gunnison, Lake San Cristobal, where people were getting in early or launching after hours and stuff with fencing up and boulders and stuff like that. Do you guys have any plans or the ability to respond in drought years like that, where you have to have those techs or
It was-
patrols out there earlier or later?
It was hard for us this year. I think we just didn't foresee it far enough in advance to have the funding to have technicians out there that early. And now that we've had this, I think we can plan ahead a little better to potentially do this, but a lot of it just depends on, do we have the ability to do this, or do we open early and then we have to close early because the funding for the season is gone, so.
I don't
It's
know, from
been
the
hard.
revenue perspective as well, if there's ability to assist in those kind of positions at our water bodies. To ensure that we are doing those, and so I guess I would just leave that open there for the board to think about. And then within those sampling periods, when you guys are out there intensively sampling for 2 weeks and stuff, I didn't know as a partner, whether any of us could help to deploy, intern crews or technicians that we might have or something to kind of help get folks out there. If you guys got a good handle on that?
I think the general day-to-day we've got a good handle on. Some folks in this room I know were involved in the big river blitz in October of last year, so. In situations like that where we're kind of call in all the troops and as many people as we can get, we like to do at least one big saturation a year of just as many eyes as we can get. But yeah,
Okay,
we'll
thank you.
definitely let you know when we need a hand. So there are times where, sometimes when there are new findings, we also do big saturation. So.
Okay.
Gary?
You mentioned private bodies of water and the owners could accept or not accept testing. But if you're there and you test and you find an infestation or whatever, you also mentioned that you couldn't do anything about it if the owner decided not to. If that body of water has the potential to, spill over into a stream and other places, is there nothing that you can do in that case?
If it can be proven that that body of water's infestation is affecting public waters, at that point, at the very least, I think we would need to take measures to isolate the body of water. if they were truly insistent that they did not want any sort of molluscicide treatment or to drain the reservoir or any other sort of mitigation measure, I think the situation would be different if we could prove that it was affecting public bodies of water.
Is this a big problem with private owners of infested or infect whatever lakes, or is it just a occasional?
I think this particular reservoir is a standout, but we are going to start seeing more and more privately owned bodies of water become infested just because of their water source from the Colorado River now. So it is something that we're trying to address, and the vast majority of people totally are on our side and they want to do the right thing and just need a little bit of direction on what that thing is. So the vast majority of people are on board with this and want our help. It's just a few sticks.
Good presentation, brother.
Thank you, thank you. I don't know, Hunter, if you want to say anything about our Lake Granby rapid response exercise, but
No, it's essentially kind of an exercise to go through what would we do if we had a detection in the upper Colorado in a river. Particularly that it's very bad.
yeah, so.
Francie, do you have a question?
I do. So the picture that you had of the propeller that was entirely encrusted. So when you stop boats coming from Lake Powell, for instance, is that what they look like, or is that an exception?
Much more rarely, much rarely. Usually what we're finding are dead shells on board a body of water, if anything. It's very few that make it through the cracks that Lake Powell cannot stop from leaving the premises looking like that.
How much exposure time does it take to have that kind of infestation?
That was probably a few years worth of being.
It was probably what?
A few years.
Oh, okay. So the
But-
boat was like living in Lake Powell all the time. I see.
But even just one season of being moored on Lake Powell, you're definitely going to see encrusted infestation.
With the number of private bodies, what is the goal at this point? Is it to contain it? Is there to eliminate at this point? What is that?
No, I would say that our hopes of eradicating the species were dashed when we started finding them in the Colorado River. From that point, we know that there are adults at several different locations in the river that are gonna continue reproducing. So as long as that is happening, it's just maintenance now. It's just mowing the proverbial lawn, I think, of trying our best to keep populations low enough in bodies of water or raw water systems that can be impacted, really costly. But yeah, I don't think eradication is something that we're hoping for. Containment.
Is there a water temperature or some other environmental condition that increases spawning success that you can affect? I'm thinking we're in a horrible drought year this year, obviously, it's a way of like running lemons into lemonade for removing invasive species.
I think that the warmer water temperatures and lower flows are more conducive to them reproducing than the alternative.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, yeah, and just within the Colorado River itself, there's so much concern about native, threatened, and endangered species that I don't really think there's much manipulation we can do to the environment in the river to limit it. Really, calcium is their only limiting factor. They'll reproduce indefinitely in high silt, high pollution, low oxygen, you name it. The only thing that they need is enough calcium in the water to build their shells with. The rest, they don't care about. That's what makes them so annoying.
We need to RO everything.
Yeah.
Reverse osmosis.
I have a question. You mentioned budget. Have you talked to the legislature in regards to increasing the budget for ANS?
Yes, but Colorado's not in the best budgetary situation right now, to my knowledge. So our program largely is funded by cost sharing with federal entities, particularly the Army Corps of Engineers. We do have a 65-35 cost share program for our entire operational budget with them, as well as a decent ANS fund that we sort of squirrel away for situations where we lose funding. But I do Don't quote me on this, but I know that there has been discussion about actually removing any severance tax that the ANS program was utilizing and taking that away from the ANS program in particular. So we're actually looking at losing more money than we're making.
In full disclosure, Maddie, you should understand this is Senator Catlin, state senator. So, Mike he's very empathetic and would be probably someone you guys should talk with. Because he could probably help.
I've helped fund a lot of that, so.
Yeah, and I
It's an
think after
important
this
thing.
last winter, we can find room for flexibility that we haven't been able to this last winter. So,
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely.
I think one last item we might want to just ask Hunter to cover is what we do at our own bodies of water that we either own or are partners in. Because I do think the district has been very proactive and we, to my knowledge, have had limited partnership with CPW on some of our stuff but we do spend quite a bit of our own money making sure that we protect.
Yeah, and that's actually a perfect transition. These are sort of my actionable things for what partners can do to support the effort. First of all, if you have social media platforms, public facing offices, anything like that, share our information, share our campaigns. That QR code will take you to our free online media kit that has all kinds of digital imagery, videos, language, captions, things that you can utilize. If you have offices and you want to give away brochures, let me know and I'll hook you up. We have brochures for pretty much every user group that there is, including private landowners and why they should let us sample their private land. So all of these educational materials, once that comes up, of what landowners and irrigators need to know, paddle boarders, waterfowl hunters, whitewater, flat water, anglers, boaters, you name it, we've got a brochure for them. So happy to distribute that as needed. Wait for my slide to change eventually it will. I don't know why there's such a lag, sorry about that. There they are. Okay, so we've got some very specific Grand Valley sort of imagery for that too. Very eye catching of, oh, I'm Garfield. I live in Palisade. Oh, maybe this is for me. So we can distribute more non-motorized cleaning stations. We do have an interactive map on the CPW website for the current location for all of these cleaning stations. But we have more to give. So if you're open to hosting one of these at any location where people are frequently launching and leaving, with sturdy boots, sturdy gear, angling equipment, boats, anything. Again, please, I'm desperate to get rid of these. So you just let me know. The trailered stations are what we call waysides. They are solar powered. They have vacuums and air compressors for getting air or for getting standing water out of hard to reach compartments. So hosting a cleaning station is a great way to support us. If you're getting any work done at any of your lakes with heavy equipment, whatever it is, whether it's a habitat project or a boat ramp project or firefighting planes scooping water out of your body of water or anything like that, let us know. We have a lot of boilerplate language for people to incorporate into agreements with folks like this that are using heavy equipment in your bodies of water, so that you have some stipulations in your agreements with them that require them to clean, drain, and dry, or submit for inspection, or let us know and we can inspect. But we have scraped mussels off of far more than just boats. So having that in mind, skipping this one. So yeah, again, we can share some boilerplate sort of contract language. You can also work with us to develop a monitoring plan. If you know of raw water systems that you have that pull water from the Colorado River or associated bodies of water, we can send our sampling crew or myself to actually inspect inside your raw water systems and sort of get a sense for how those operate, so we can help you assess the risk of that system, talk through potential options if you did start finding mussels within the system, things like that. So work with us on a monitoring plan. We do try our best to be the ones that are doing the monitoring for these species, just because we have a very standardized way of doing things. That's been tried and true. So if you know of somewhere that you're not sure if sampling is happening and you'd like to know, let me know. If you know it's not, we can work together to kind of develop a monitoring plan as well. I guess I'm just not sharing my screen anymore. The last thing I would say, report sightings. If you've got people working on the ground, let them know what these species look like. If you need resources for what they look like, you can check out our website or my recently no longer being shared screen. And just have people report sightings. The way that we found them in this body of water in Newcastle was from the town of Newcastle employees that were just working there and said, well, that kind of looks like it shouldn't be there, and they let us know, and that was how we found mussels in that particular location. So definitely just let us know, keep your eyes out. If you have staff on the ground, have them keep their eyes out. If my screen shares itself, this is really the last slide that I would hope for you guys to see. Commonly mistaken for zebra mussels are corbiculate clams. Those are all throughout Colorado. They are non-native. They are pretty much everywhere in Colorado. They are a pain in the butt for their own reasons, but they are not the same thing as a mussel. We respond to anyone's sighting of mussels or what they think are mussels, and most of the time it's corbiculate clams, but we always take those reports seriously. So I did try to include a few photos that I've taken of mussels that we've actually found out in the wild. But yeah, just let us know what you're seeing. Host a cleaning station, hand out brochures, post on social media, and reach out to me if you have any questions, comments, concerns, pictures of is this mussel or is it not. I'm always happy to receive those. So sorry if I went over time a little bit, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Maddie.
Any
Did you
further
want me to speak
questions?
to?
Seeing none, thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
Can I ask one last question? At Highline, do you see human use of the boat jacuzzi late at night?
So it is fenced. It is fully fenced.
Just curious.
The contractor told us that there was no way that someone would be stupid enough and they shouldn't have to build a fence. And we said, there is a way.
You underestimate.
And Hunter is evidence of exactly.
Going down a new area.
Yeah, he's been up there.
Yeah.
It is fenced. Please don't try to decontaminate yourself.
Thank you, Maddie. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Did you drive over from Grand Junction?
What's that?
Did you drive over from Grand Junction?
I did.
Is the road open?
Yeah, it looked like it was. I took the detour and then I was looking at I-70 and I saw vehicles on it, eastbound.
Westbound was open?
No, I don't think
One
westbound
lane
was open. It
eastbound
had snow
is-
plows parked on the on-ramp.
Yeah.
But things could have changed. That's all I know. I'll let you know when I get back.
Thank you.
Well, you can go
You
on.
might be spending the
I was
night.
gonna show you a video, I passed it this morning.
And I'm going back to Gordondale for meeting 5.
You can
Westbound.
Yeah, that's happening. That's having a hard time, like,
And I have to have a meeting.
yeah, it's still.
On the way there.
That's how you get around. All right, director's concerns.
Okay, I'm ready. So let's go into director's concerns and updates. Why don't we just start here on my left?
Starting with tourism, it's been soft the last few years in Summit County. Obviously, this past winter was not good. But I will also say that the last couple of summers, leading up into 4th of July and a little bit beyond have been pretty darn soft. And I expected to see that exact same scenario this summer. Alden, you mentioned yesterday a lot of crowds up in your end of the world over the 4th, and we had huge crowds. Unexpected, in my opinion. But maybe it's a fact that people are taking drive trips despite the cost of everything. And even though gas is up, it's still cheaper to take a drive vacation. And But it appears that summer tourism, at least so far, is back and pretty strong. It's been strong, as I said, through the fourth and since, so that's a good sign. Lots of observations about how people are responding to the drought. The county and the towns in Summit County all have various water restrictions going. But one of the things I thought was interesting was several of the fields and parks, at least in Breckenridge and I'd say also down in Frisco, are bone dry brown, which I thought was, you never like to see that, but it's a good reaction to the drought. But more importantly, with all the tourists that I just mentioned, there was even, you kind of walk through the crowds and listen, boy, this place is dried up. I think it's good that tourists, I would assume lots of these are from the Front Range, are seeing some dried up areas in the resort towns, and hopefully that translates to something back down in the Front Range. We'll see. The other thing I think was interesting to observe is, the Blue River running through Breckenridge. That was reconstructed years ago. The dredge boats had come through and turned the river upside down many years ago. Actually, when I was the city manager there, we reclaimed that river. And it's been a, huge success with kids and stuff in the water during the 4th of July. This 4th of July, hardly any water. I mean, it was less than a dribble. It just pathetic. Still 1,000 kids down there playing, but that's okay. Kids will play anywhere. The driving across the Dillon Dam Road, Lake Dillon is obviously way down. I haven't seen it this bad since the early 2000s. I think 2002 was the rough year. But it's interesting to see all the infrastructure pieces that become visible once the lake draws down. One of those is the Glory Hole. It's kind of the drain spillway to keep Dillon from getting above what's the number, 9,017 feet or something like that. I had it here. Yeah, that's the high mark, highest surface elevation that Dillon will go. And it partly is regulated by this Glory Hole. It is sticking up off the lake 15, 20 feet out of the bottom of the lake. It's just looks so weird. The other thing you'd notice is, well, very few boats. The marinas, there are some boats in the water. I don't know where they're mooring at night, but they're there. But both, I believe now, both of the boat ramps, one in Frisco, one in Dillon, are closed down. So what you get is a bunch of blue shrink wrapped boats sitting still on the side of the lake. It's a weird thing to see at this time of the year when usually the boats are all over the place, but you now have them lined up on shore, wrapped up in the blue plastic they evidently got wrapped in last fall. Interesting. Said the marinas are closed down for the most part. But I think it's going well. You'll go by the Goose Pasture Tarn, that's south of Breckenridge. That's where Breckenridge's main water supply they have a pump back from Lake Dillon as well. But the main source of water for the town of Breckenridge in the upper Blue River Valley is Goose Pasture Tarn. It's full. It hasn't going down yet, but we'll see how that lasts through the summer. So it's a long hot summer. I will say that the golf courses even are taking things seriously. You do a lot of hand watering around greens and tees, but the fairways, at least at Breckenridge, have gotten pretty brown. There's a silver lining there. My drives roll at least another 20, 30 yards, which I desperately need. So, it's a mixed bag. So that's about it. I will say, Stephanie, you texted me yesterday about the meeting on September 29th with the commissioners. I will be able to make that meeting with who's it, Zane and maybe I can't remember who else, but I'll be attending.
Sounds like I'll be.
Andy or
there.
Henry will be joining.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll see you
All
then.
right.
Mark? Well, Delta County, we're just like everybody else. We're high and dry and but we're surviving. And, it's been a tough year. Decrees on some of those tributary ditches were called within the first 2 weeks of May. So, it was went without some of the reservoirs. One of the ones that I personally, some lease grounds have, it was out of water. It only got a third full before those decrees were called, so they couldn't store anymore. And it was out of water the second week of June. And so there's a lot of brown ground there. Of course, the freeze wiped out all the fruit. And some ways, in some parts of the county, that was a blessing. They were talking over in Cedar Ridge about debudding the trees because they didn't think they had enough water to raise fruit and keep the tree alive. So the freeze actually did them a favor and just took the fruit, so they pretty sure they can keep the trees alive. But it's been a tough year. And then on the Uncompahgre Valley water users down the lower end of the county, looking at 40-50% fallow ground. And that has an effect even on the livestock industry, because there's a lot of those farm fields that people use for winter feed for livestock, and it's not going to be there this year. So it'll pan out, but there is some uncertainty about where we go from here. And I keep hoping for the super El Nino to kick in. We haven't gotten much yet. But, and then I guess another thing I would bring up is, the roundtable, Gunnison Basin Roundtable have made a big push towards getting money towards rehabilitation of dams and aging infrastructure in general. And I think for the most part, we've given up on building new dams because I don't think we got the water to fill them. So in the past 25 years, we've been in the route. Probably four out of those 25 years have been decent years. So we're kind of accepting that and really aiming towards the infrastructure problem. IDCC is talking about it. I think we made some headway the last IDCC meeting. I want to thank Andy personally that bringing up the statutory language, I think, was a big help. And then he clarified some things that maybe we can use the water fund for not just new projects, not just municipal projects, but for aging infrastructure across the state. I think we've got that ball rolling, and I plan to keep it rolling. But thanks again for your input there.
Good to know that I actually made a difference in meeting of the IDCC, because sometimes that
I
can
know
feel
what you mean.
pretty hopeless.
But I do think.
And told that a few times.
But anyway, Delta County will be there tomorrow too, so we will survive. Evie?
So, we're like everybody else, we're just burning out, but it's hard to see when your creek, you can probably walk across the creek and not get too wet. There were some rains up above us that increased the creek almost double, I would say, which was nice to see, but that's short-lived. There's a lot of bicycles, campers, whatever, that have been going through our county on those back roads, mainly because a lot of those places where they had gone previously, all the fires, now we're starting to see the fires, and of course we've had smoke from all over also. On my ranch, we have one house well that has gone dry. Our cattle, we have permits right behind my house. We were able to put about a third of the animals up there, so I still have cattle on my fields. So I'm looking at cattle sales. A lot of my neighbors are doing the same thing. So this fall, probably flood the market, but grocery stores won't see that. It'll just be a hit to the ranching economy. A lot of the people that are scouting for hunting season, you know, they'll call, they'll whatever, show up. I've heard Colorado's in a drought or the West Slope's in a drought. But gosh, I've never seen the fields and the area in such a situation. And so they hear about the drought, but they don't feel it until they see it, which is, I think, the majority. I mean, we're all year to year, it just seems to be getting worse, which for those of us that drove through Montrose and from Gunnison, on my trip up there, that's the most rain I've seen in, I don't know, years. And, you know, it's when we get rain, it's 20 minutes maybe, and it's just a drizzle. You can count that on less than one hand, what we've had. So I'm up high, fairly high, and the lower streams just aren't there on BLM. Forest Service water's up high. The nearest fire that we've had is the Oak Fire, which we have not had, but it's less than 30 miles from my house. And of course, Saguache County is full of beetle kill. So if that ever crosses or goes to the south of Powderhorn and Lake City, it's gonna be vicious. So we really appreciate everyone that's helped with the fires. CPW has also suggested no fishing in Coach Tope Creek in the afternoons, which I don't know if we even have any fish anymore. But I guess also we have a lot of the algae in our streams, and people continue to stop and let their kids play in the creeks. And I don't know if there's a way, I guess it's probably CPW, maybe BLM, but there should be some signage that's dangerous. So that's a big concern. And of course, I guess if you have no water in the creek, maybe that may dry out that algae, and I don't know. I don't think there's any way to get to that, but anyway, very, very grim like everywhere else. Thank you.
Thank you.
In Gunnison County, I would say, right now, incredibly concerned about the situation at Blue Mesa Reservoir. The ongoing releases, the slow response from the Bureau of Reclamation, just really depleted that reservoir system. The docks are in the middle of the reservoir. They pulled them out further to where they won't get damaged. It's impacting the Upper Colorado River Commission evaporative study on Blue Mesa Reservoir as well, given that it's such a low water year. If we have another significant drought year and lack of snow, it's very likely that the Uncompahgre Valley water users would be able to place a call on the river. And that means in this early spring of 2027, we could have our junior water right users being called out very early in the season. And so I think the federal government's operation of that system is impacting water rights broadly up in our basin and has potential to do so next year. With regard to the snow season and the lack of snow, we didn't see a lot of impact early in the season with regard to hotel visits, restaurants visits, because I think those people have made those reservations early, but we are starting to see it now. The lack of water is infecting the commercial boating industry. We're really struggling right now, even on the Taylor, to keep those guys operating through the end of July. So I think their season will be probably cut short beginning early in August, maybe that first week of August, because we just don't have any more water to provide to supplement the system. I haven't heard of, and I looked on the internet recently just to see if there were any notices of harmful algal blooms in Blue Mesa Reservoir at this time. I didn't see any from the National Park Service. On a positive note, the Gunnison County CSU Extension Office and the Upper Gunnison District are working in partnership. We've purchased and are leasing out for free this year a drill seeder. It's a specific type of drill seeder that doesn't create a deep harrow in the ground to put that seed in, just because we can't disrupt our soils. It's highly impactful. And so we're leasing that out to the public for free, and the district is also paying for 50% of the cost of the seed, just to see if we can get some more experimentation with some drought tolerant grass hay species. And if these monsoons come, this is a really good year for us to do it, to plant that seed, and then hopefully next year at springtime, some of that will come up, because we are seeing our fields impacted by this drought. Producers in parts of Gunnison County started haying early, 30 to 45 days early, are putting up some hay, especially in basins like the Ohio Creek and Tamichi. Tamichi, I think, was one of or Razor Creek was one of the first tributaries in the Tamichi River on fall, I think around the second of this year, which is very early. We did host the Colorado Water Conservation Board on an Upper Gunnison Basin tour. And it focused on the East River Basin. We highlighted a lot of projects that we've been working on and have kept river district staff apprised of, including Mount Crested Butte Water and Sanitation's districts, use of our storage right in Meridian Lake or Long Lake Reservoir. The town of Seabees looking for an alternate water supply in the case of an emergency, so redundancy in that system, which we mentioned yesterday. Improvements to municipal infrastructure, Lake Irwin, they have to artificially keep that reservoir at a higher elevation, because if we don't, CPW's infrastructure is not working sufficiently such that we can push that water into Anthracite Creek and maintain CWCD's in-stream flow. So a lot of aging infrastructure and infrastructure improvements that we're looking at making in Gunnison County. The Elk Creek fire, as Raby mentioned, or Elk Fire, I looked yesterday and it was 2,307 acres in size with 0% containment. The Gold Mountain yesterday, or on Monday, I think was 38,000 acres with 24% containment. So we're watching both of those closely. The Gold Mountain fire has moved into that southwestern corner of Gunnison County. And then of course the Elk Fire. Stream temperatures on the Lake Fork River at Gateview were 78 degrees on Monday. That's definitely not a temperature that we're going to be seeing fish hills. Speaking of temperature, I don't know if the rest of the board saw the notice that the Water Quality Control Commission is going to exercise relaxation and enforcement of stream temperatures this year because of the extreme nature of this drought. They didn't say specifically what that means, but it did say a relaxation and consideration of it. Yeah, we're aggressively pursuing opportunities to replace and modernize aging infrastructure, which the River District's been a wonderful partner in that. And we're combining that funding with other sources from CWCB and the Upper Gunnison District to get that done. And on average, I would say we're probably completing, 15 to 18 structures per year, which is really great for us. And then the ag return flow study, last thing, we will be calling our first meeting of that technical committee with USGS, which includes technical staff from the Colorado River District as agreed to in our CFP award. So that's about it on my side.
Thank you, Sonia. Tom?
Yeah, so to start with the ENA team did a great job putting some articles in our local paper about the drought response, and got at the coffee shop. It's well received. Good job. I think Hunter too has done a good job of communicating with the senior water right caller that puts a call over here. And he's been working really good with the releases. So that's all seamless. We didn't get the normal put the call on for 2 days because bureaucracy didn't respond. So that's all been good. We all knew that it was going to be a bad year, so we kind of braced for it back in March. We haven't felt the real huge impact. We knew it was going to be short. I think the other shoe is going to drop here in a couple of weeks when those releases begin to run out, and not only the releases we're making, but the fish water releases and so on. So it's, unless we get some significant monsoons, which my phone says it's gonna rain half an inch today up there, so let's hope that they get somewhere like that. Aside from drought, in Moffett County in general, people are just a little more anxious, I think, both locally and globally about life in general. Some of the things that's may be causing that, I don't know. Tri-State was saying they were probably going to replace part of the coal-fired power plant with a 300 megawatt gas turbine. That's off the table now. Was it feasible? Apparently. They're pretty close-lipped about why, but they have said, yeah, we're not going to do that. And Moffett County did receive, and the city of Craig both, a pretty good lump sum of cash for the closure of the power plant, kind of transition money. I'm pretty proud of our commissioners, and they've appointed an economic development team that's taking this money, so we're not going to spend it except for the interest on it, and they've got some pretty tight guidelines. It has to be for spent for base type of economic development and base improvement. Is the primary job creation is the only things that we spent for, and they've got some ideas. One of the things they're very much considering, and I have to back up a minute. A couple years ago, Moffett County helped negotiate with Tri-State what's going to happen to those water rights, and there was an exemption for abandonment until 2050, as long as those water rights were used specifically for some economic development purposes. Commissioners are looking at the possibility of a data center. If those water rights would be used in a data center, then they would allow a cooling tower type system based on those water rights. If they don't use those water rights, they would have to build a closed loop system. County's in the process of developing regulations for how a data center in other ways would have to re-operate. We do have a 2,000 acre solar field. Anybody that's driven up from the south can see the thing. And just for perspective, you know, we're all concerned about Lake Powell, 1,350 megawatts. That's the exact same size as the power plant in Craig. When all three units go away, that's the same size as Powell, but that's permanent. That's not temporary. So that gives you perspective. That solar field, 2,000 acres, produces 135 megawatts, 5.5 hours a day. That's when peak sun, that's in our zip code, peak sunlight's 5.5 hours per day. So 135 megawatts for 2,000 acres. Do the math. You need to produce half of what the power plant needs. You need 90,000 acres of solar panels, and you need batteries to store it. So this gives you a perspective of what we're losing and what renewables and what. I mean, I'm all for solar. I'm actually putting solar on my irrigation pump because I'm afraid with 50% power increases by 2030, I won't be able to afford to irrigate my field. So, so I'm all for solar, but it's not the answer for base load energy. Yes, do we need to quit using coal at some point, but not until we've got replacement. That's my opinion, and I'm plugging it right now. But anyway, I think people are a little nervous in Moffett County, as they probably are everywhere. The local drought and economic impact is just making us look broader and saying, boy, I don't remember when I was anxious about things. The other side of that is most wrecks never happen. You know, you think that you could have an accident or get wrecked, but usually it's not as bad as you thought, or it didn't even happen at all. So that's what I'm banking on. Yes.
Thanks, Tom. Alvin?
Thank you. When I mentioned increase in tourism, it's more or less with the OHV piece, so it's not water-based. Other than Maddie left, but Kenny Reservoir is really busy just because it's full, because it's a run of the river project. And you've got a lot of reservoirs in Utah and the surrounding areas that are nearly empty. So these people are looking for a place to come and recreate. So, tensions get high when you're competing for a limited space meaning you've got 24 boats fighting for about 175 acres, surface acres. So it's, luckily, most of them are going fairly slow, but still tensions are high. As we hear regularly. So it is good to see the OHV. I mean, they had their first national event this past weekend that actually brought in about 5,000 visitors to Rangeley, Colorado. It was insane. Travis Pastrana, Def Leppard's lead singer, or one of their guitarists were there. So I mean, they really brought in some pretty big names. If you and I'm learning these names. But
Do you all the time?
I do. Well, I'm a rock and roll junkie, so I'll take it. So, it was really good to see that because it was all family based. I mean, really was. So, but that's a niche that they can use, and they're using that because we got about 2,000 miles of trails around Rangeley. It's pretty intense. So, localized water contingency planning and preparedness efforts have been feverish over the past few months, just because we have such limited resources. And a few that stand out is Rangeley finalized an emergency conservation plan and policy that includes 4 stages and some penalties that puts caps on water usages. But let's just say there were several community meetings that were very well attended. When you get 50, 60 people from Rangeley and Town Hall, that's a pretty darn good packed house. And passionate, it was passionate and heated. But we're learning that Craig had something similar here not too long ago. Vernal had something like that, you know, and those are kind of our neighboring communities, and they were all pretty common conversations. So tensions are high. People are anxious. People are grumpy. They're quick to snap. That's just the reality of what it is. So, and that's where it's kind of seeming like to calm down. Earlier this year, tensions were even higher. So we've got an enormous amount of brown lawns in our community. The golf course has come out. They've cut back on some of their water usages as well. But one of the things that we learned from them is this is just a little 9-hole course. You can let your fairways go brown. And I know, Gary, you like that, you know, because you get another bounce to your ball. But the greens, I guess those greens and tee boxes, if they let those go, that's about $1.5 million that they lost. So even though they got to protect some of that pieces, even though you want them to conserve more water, they can, but they can't lose some of that core infrastructure that's so expensive to replace. So earlier this year, we watched and I seen an enormous amount of backhoes, bulldozers, ditch cleaners, those V rippers that they put in the ditches. I've seen equipment that I ain't ever seen in my life being hauled out, and they're cleaning ditches, getting their infrastructure brought up so that they can apply the water to where they need to. And it shows. I've seen water standing in fields now that I haven't seen in 20 years that I've been almost in Rangeley. So, and the river shows it too. I mean, there's some shortages happening in there right now. So, but while they were doing it, they also did quite a few assessments of what they've seen. And these ditches need some help is what they identified. And that's unfortunate, but that's what happens over time. Some ditches are deeper. They've just eroded out over years, so they can't get to their head gates and get the water out as they would. So that's creating some additional shortages when the river gets lower. Administration is effect. We've reached out several entities in the county, water districts, county extension, conservation districts, Colorado Ag Water Alliance, Colorado Cattlemen's Association, Ag Water Network, just to name a few, have been reaching out to these folks to kind of help them identify sources to get in there and do some engineering, and let's get some work done on these things. But we did find a bottleneck, and we've seen the bottleneck before, and it's no blame of their own, but our local USDA, their hands are pretty strapped out of that Craig and Meeker office. They're kind of split, one person between 2 counties. So there's not a whole lot of work being done. And one of my coworkers, he phoned in about 2 years ago. He finally got a call, missed the phone call, and she hasn't called back now in 6 months. So that's the backlog. You have to be there. You have to go forward when it's there, or you get reset back into the line. So it would be great to see if USDA could get some assistance there, but it sounds like that's not gonna happen anytime soon, because there's a pretty good opportunity there for some folks to do some improvements. And because we do have new lands going into production right now, that these folks have not been able to get their water out, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit, so. Low flows are the norm over the past 2 years, actually over the winter, and even continuing today. We see an enormous amount of sediment coming down the White River, just from post-fire. We had those monsoons in September last year that pushed it out of the fire, but it dumped it all into the river and in these streams, and over time, it's just slowly been making its way down, down into Kenny Reservoir and through the river system. April and May were scarier times. We were seeing August flows in April this year and May. And everything was fine up until July 19. And then from the past 4 days to today, last week we were at, at Boise Creek, which is about 15 miles east of Rangeley. Flows were about 160, 170, and today I looked, we were down to 165 or 65, 65 CFS. So that's a pretty big hit, and the next 4 weeks are gonna be hold your breath. So random monsoons would help. But what we've seen is she's looking all rough and tough, and she's gonna dump, and then she pulls that dollar away and says, no, not yet.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
Just kidding. But I'm gonna leave you, and by the way, I'm gonna leave you about 8 little fire hot spots out there, so. And last weekend, we had about 8 fires, in that, at 10 maybe. But a lot of the local community people hopped on their side-by-sides, and even the Raleigh, Colorado folks stopped the race, went out there, and they go put the fire out quick, and back to the race they go. Because they saw the devastation that last year was like with 150,000 acres burned up. So that really spooks people. That fire really, really scares the heck out of people, including me. So with the low flows, we've also seen a new algae bloom happen at Kenny Reservoir. I've been there now for pushing 20 years. I've never seen it before. It did appear, in my opinion, to be a blue-green algae, cyanobacteria. But 3 days later, we had some big winds. It blew it apart. It's gone. We're watching because it's been incredibly windy in our part of the world this year. So you'd swear we're in Chicago, but we keep watching it every week. We've done some minor public visits with just people that are there this is what you want to look for, just some education, but it's something that we keep watching for. The wildlife push to the river right now is intense. More bears in town than what we've seen. Elk, deer, herds of elk are just down along the rivers. Pretty significant. And that's creating some conflicts, not only for the people in town with the bears snooping on their porch or through their garden, or is it the rancher that's also dealing with it by going out with 100 head of elk going through their alfalfa and taking a full season's cutting when you're only probably gonna get 1, maybe 2 cuttings this year. So that makes them ranchers a little bit growly too, and I don't blame them. The drought severity over last year and this year has really made some folks, and some emphasis on some agencies, more apt to share conversations. Some are telling me a drought like this does not constitute an emergency. So when I'm told that, boy, you can just imagine how that sits with me and those that I work with and our community. So when you're out of water, that's not an emergency. So if you want to learn more about that, I'll tell you, but not right now. So, but we do have some good things moving forward. So we do have some great conversations that have developed. We've got the first of its kind augmentation plan underway in Rio Blanco County. It's a cooperative effort between the Yellow Jacket Water Conservancy District, Rio Blanco Water District, and Colorado Parks and Wildlife. It's an incredible joint effort to where all parties are sitting there going, we can benefit from each other. Here's how we can benefit. Here's our tools. Here's our resources. Let's make it work. My God, we got something working, and we're not going to stop. We're going to keep going and get this thing finalized. So I'm actually quite thrilled to hear that conversation go to that level, because cooperation like that is not always found. So, recovery program, there's new visits coming up with those folks. I guess at Dry River last year and learning some new tools, has kind of revigorated that conversation, and, we've had very beneficial conversations with them, recognizing what they need, but what tools are available to them too. So, emergency operations and releases for municipal needs. Rangeley really took their hand and wiped their brow, and they breathed a sigh of relief, because we do have a mechanism to do emergency releases of water out of Kenny Reservoir for them. Realize emergency operations is not like under good conditions. This is minimal water you're getting. And that's the way it's directed from the federal agencies. They have to be under full-blown restrictions, their water conservation plan. Division of Water Resources involved. So I mean, it's not like you can keep going and, live life like you can. Oh, no. This is, you get enough to keep your household going, and that's about it. So, and you're recycling water in your home if you want to garden. That's really where how far that emergency releases go. So several new agricultural fields, you kind of heard me mention that a little bit ago, are being prepped. And some are struggling because of the USDA piece. They're waiting for that nexus to get done. But it's good and bad at the same time from what we're seeing when we're talking with them. This is new agriculture. It's great. We're putting water rights to beneficial use and water to beneficial use. Ag is the real backbone of Rio Blanco County. Everything can go away, but ag is still going to be there. And that's our belief. Ag is also one of our best water stewards in our county. So it helps shore up our economy. It's investments to our county, supports small farms, small ranch families, and those values that those families bring. That's very important for those customs and cultures in our county. The bad part is that we've got less water that these folks are trying to utilize and put on these fields to grow a new crop. And the mentality that really, because we did considerable surveys throughout our county last year over the winter. And really the mentality is, well, I have a senior water right, so I have water. No, just because you have a water right does not mean you have water. You got to have the water to fulfill the water right. And that mentality is really hard for us to break. And then the other part of it is we've asked for these folks to kind of share with us some stuff, but there's fear mongering that's been instilled from the state through the Division of Water Resources that they don't want to tell anybody what they're going to do with the water for the fear of it being used against them. So that was honest feedback that we got from people. So, but then again, talking with these folks that are trying to put land in, it showed the backlog within the NRCS because they're all lined up wanting to get this work done, but they just can't do it. So, and the other impetus that we got was, I mentioned, and I'm not trying to beat up the DNR, the DWR, but this is reality of what I'm getting, is the abandonment list has instilled a fear in these folks that have taken a lot of pride in these decrees that are post-compact that they consider a property right. That's really embedded in their mind. It's attached to their property, but the state says you got to use it or lose it, and you either put it to beneficial use. So you're in drought times and you're forced to put it to beneficial use or you lose it. So you're going to take a big financial risk to put that 60-acre field into production and get the irrigation set up and then maybe not get a crop. But by God, I get to keep my water right, there's valor in that. But that is very hard, realistic conversations that we're having. And I'm glad to be able to hear that and learn that, but that's really kind of spooky. And a real push for them to make a financial risk for the fear of the abandonment list. So, with that, I'll leave it. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Alden. Scott?
Thank you. First of all, Andy, on the, you and your team and your cooperation with the irrigation companies down there is excellent. And those irrigation companies have very, very senior rights. And it does mean water. And there is water. And ironically, at my house, so we have an irrigation ditch. What we didn't anticipate is how cooperative people are being on conserving water. And now they're flooding our ditches. There's a lot of water coming down those ditches and we didn't anticipate that. But you mentioned bears for the weekend, we found a dead bear in our ditch.
Oh, geez.
Right, and we live in downtown Grand Junction, not downtown, in the populated area. Anyway,
Oh,
nobody ever thought about, wow, there's gonna be a lot of water. And so, but you saw on the slides, I think that the weather's gonna be cyclical. It's kind of like a wolf howling at the moon. I mean, it's what it is. Those mussels are a massive problem. And the last slide she showed shows you what those pipelines look like. And that one slide up there showed all those dots in Mesa County. And the effort they put into Highline Canal, I mean, we've got great assistance, parks and federal government. And I hear these people, by the way, criticizing the federal government on, I think primarily driven by maybe political purposes, but nonetheless, while watching their assistance with the mussels and with those fires, of course, we lost firefighters. But when those fires broke out down there, man, we had helicopters and airplanes and all kinds of assistance very quickly. And once we lost firefighters, even that, then it doubled even more. So we've got a lot of good positive things as far as assistance, but that communication, I think, really encouraged the irrigation people to pitch in, and they have pitched in. So kudos to you and the team. And from a political viewpoint, and saying you can help me on this, but I think everybody looked at Diana DeGette's district, but I understood that there were 4 primaries on the Democratic side where 4 incumbents were taken out and replaced by 4 people with a socialistic type of view. And we're starting to hear more and more of that. I read an article the other day about rain barrels, and I think it's the Sterling subdivision. About their answer to water is we're gonna provide rain barrels for everybody. And they're not creating any new water, they're stealing water. That water is already spoken for. But I think we're gonna see more political effort. They're not gonna be able to come and take the right away. But they are gonna be able to dilute it in different ways, like all of a sudden allowing people to, well, you can go ahead and keep that water, or you can go ahead and do this. And that's, when you look at the shift that's taking place over there, I think we're gonna have to, we have what they want. She mentioned yesterday, Andy, and I know my friends, when I've tried to educate them on where their water comes from, they look at us and say, yeah, that'll be our water. This is where the population is and we need the water and so on and so forth. So I think we're gonna have a lot more political activities, Zane, than we've seen in the past as far as our seniority system in the state. That really affects our county because we're at the very top seniority. So we worry about that. Other than that, you've all mentioned the problems of the ground, things like that, well covered. I will tell you that when we lost the firefighters and when I think up in that helicopter went down in Silverjack. That's Gunnison or is that?
Right at the edge of
Montrose.
County. So even for that helicopter and those 3 firefighters, the city of Grand Junction, Mesa County, when they had their escort, thought about it, you'd have been very proud. I mean, the streets were packed with people paying their respects. And so hopefully that doesn't repeat itself, but it will, and it has. Other than that, I just really want to emphasize that, in my opinion, the most significant act taken in the history of the River District is that Shoshone. And now we're beginning to see why the dividends, because that's one thing they're going to try. They're stunned, number one, that your team got it under contract. And number 2, that they know what the future of that means. They're not going to be able to turn that into a rain barrel for the slope. So again, thanks for all your effort on that, you and the staff and the board as well. I think we're going to look back at that and say, good move. on behalf of a lot of people. So that's the report.
Thanks, Scott. Francie?
Okay, we had a presentation from Aspen Ski Co. recently. They were down 20% this year, and they reported on how the ski industry has been dropping off for the last 30 years. It was a pretty honest corporate discussion that you don't hear very often, and you know, they're nervous about it. They're asking for, you know, cooperation from the county and the city for housing. They can't bring in employees if they don't have housing for them and that kind of stuff. It was during that presentation that I heard about the making snow, that 90% of the water goes back into the watershed. It was from the ski co. I heard this, so I don't know if it's really true, but it was fairly good news because they're making a lot of snow. And one of the things that the head of Aspen Ski Company told us was that there are some ski areas that have been asked by their communities to make snow in April at the end of the season, because that snow holds the water and releases it more slowly than just having it run down whatever water source they're pulling their snowmaking from. I thought that was an interesting approach to slowing down the runoff and keeping water around. We both, or Garfield, Eagle, and Pickens County are all in stage 2 fire restrictions, probably most people are. One of the requirements with stage 2 restrictions is that you can't take your car off of any roads. I mean, you can drive an established county road or dirt road, but you can't take your car off of those roads. And we have an application in front of us, the VOCC, which is why I'm needing a few minutes to go back up to Aspen to our meeting, is for the racetrack. I don't know if you guys are aware, there's a racetrack up in Woody Creek that's been around since 1963, and it's a grandfathered legal non-compliant use on an RS-20 piece of property. And they've put in an application to expand this thing ginormously, including a 450,000 gallon water tank. And everybody's sort of, well, how are they going to fill that, you know? But we were up there the other day doing a site visit, and there were like 20 cars that their parking guy had parked in the dry grasses, and the sheriff was there, and I was like, Michael, all those cars are parked, they're all off-road, you know? So that was the first violation we'd seen of that. It was shocking. Let's see. Our airport plan, as you know, is huge. And the only thing I want to mention about that is that the airport, the maximum size of the new terminal will be something like in excess, but not a lot of excess, over 100,000 square feet of terminal. But this racetrack thing they're putting forward is 250,000 square feet of infrastructure. So just to keep things in perspective. The water in our valley, it's very strange. The East Mesa Ditch, Jessup, the Ella, Sweet Jessup, the Ella, they're all running. And like Tom Bailey's property is pumping out. I have no idea how many gallons of water all day long, every day, middle of the day, all day. So we've got irrigation going on. The Crystal's running yesterday it was running at 97 CFS up by Avalanche. Taylor Fish Place says it was 100, but you know, it's very low. The Roaring Fork is at 110 CFS. And in both rivers, the temperatures have been reaching greater than 71. So we have a voluntary fish closure from noon till midnight. So you can fish in the early mornings. But it may get worse. I don't know how that's going to go. I don't know why the ditches are running so full. It's really amazing when you look at the Crystal, just what would it look like if all those ditches weren't pulling all that water, but everybody's irrigating. It's weird. it has, the crystal has dropped 20% in the last 3 days, so I imagine something's gonna change here pretty soon. Let's see, well, one of the strange things that's happened is that Aspen is drier than Carbondale. So if you go into downtown Aspen, you know how Aspen and Vale, they have flowers everywhere, grass along the roads, and it's just, everything is pristine and manicured. Well, Aspen's, all of the, just the space between the sidewalk and the roads that's usually full is all brown. And apparently it's the kind of growth in the high altitude, and the trees are bigger, the type of species there don't recover to it in a rainfall. So like if we have rainfalls down here in Glenwood or Carbondale, everything greens up for a few days. We don't have that in the Upper Valley because we don't have that kind of growth. So it's really shocking to go into Aspen now, and they are under restrictions. So is Carbondale. I don't know if Glenwood is. Is Glenwood under restrictions?
It's standard drought restrictions, which is really only every other day.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to bring to your attention that our county is involved in is a bill that's coming to the state legislature about what would you call this? Technology fire protection. So in Pitkin, for instance, we have 6 Pano sites. These are AI operated sites throughout the county that have constant eye on the topography, and if there's anything that looks at all like smoke, it contacts the fire departments. So there's a bill, we sent a letter to the who we sent it to? Maybe you, I don't know. But anyway, we sent a letter supporting the development of this in all the counties, because it's really made a difference. It's about several fires in that area already. And so it would provide some kind of funding to help other counties develop this fire protection. It's a pretty amazing system. We were the first place to try it, and we're pretty happy. And I did see in the paper yesterday, the fur bearer petition to CPW was defeated. So I think it was a 6-5 vote from the commissioners, and they voted to leave the control of the fur bearing population with CPW and not honor the petition to ban the taking of fur bearing animals for their fur. So that's something that's going to affect everybody. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention was the BLM. This is another thing that our county has taken a stand on. The BLM passed a lifting of the ban on the MM44 cyanide bombs that are put out with meat on it in order to attract, was originally developed for coyotes so that the coyote comes and pulls on the meat, the cyanide bomb explodes and kills the coyote. So apparently, Mark just told me about this. BLM said that they're going to review it in case by case policy, so that you can't just go out and put these out now, but they used to be banned entirely in Colorado, and that ban has now been lifted by the BLM. And I don't know what kind of process went into that decision, because we didn't hear about it till after the decision was made. So just wanted to make you guys aware of that. And other than that, that's Pitkin County.
Uray County, yeah, we're on fire and it's hot and it's dry and it's not great. We don't have any fish closures because we don't have any water in our creeks. So there's that. Tourism's been impacted, certainly above Ridgeway Reservoir. So we really have a lot of people tubing the Uncompahgre, which is a popular thing to do. Super fun. But there's not enough water this year to do it. Normally we're around 190 CFS this time of year. We're like 60. Cow Creek, which normally has maybe 50 CFS, and it is maybe 4 yesterday. We had a massive rainstorm somewhere in Cow Creek, which turned Cow Creek into mostly mud. So a lot of ditches turned off, including mine. I think the most alarming thing to watch over this year is that the wind has created conditions where even if you've irrigated what you normally do, the normal amount of irrigation, you come back to it in a week and if you dropped a match in it, it would go up with no moisture in the plant. So there's gonna be a lot of folks that I don't think are gonna put up hay. A lot of our ranchers tried to go to pastures in the high country that they normally lease, and there's no grass or water there. So we've already seen a couple of families sell off pretty big chunks of their herd and ship cows to places that they normally don't have to use. So they're incurring costs outside of their normal expenses, which is gonna hurt their bottom line.
You mean shipping them to pastures somewhere else?
One of the guys shipped them to Oklahoma.
Oh.
It seems drastic, but he just got tired of looking for little pastures here and there, and and I think a lot of folks won't have hay production this year unless things really turn around. We really haven't been receiving rain other than these little spotty events. The big joke is tomorrow, don't worry, it'll rain tomorrow. We've been going through this for weeks. San Miguel Basin, though, right across the hill, has gotten really devastated by some rainstorms. So what might be unfortunate is the Gold Mountain fire gets hit by some rainstorms. Those creeks where it started, Cutler Creek, Dexter Creek, Bridal Veil Creek are extremely steep. I've hunted all through that. I was just looking at my Onyx maps and I've got little points all through the fire areas. So I know it well. And if we get rain events in some of those areas, we're going to see some pretty devastating debris flows. We've already seen debris flows in those areas without a fire in recent rain events that have taken out ditches, highway, county roads. So the county's trying to plan for that reaction. They've been working with River District staff, which is great. I hope we get something started with Forest Service because a lot of this is on Forest Service grounds. The fires obviously moved off into the forest and the wilderness area over into Gunnison County where Silverjack Reservoir is located. There's going to be impacts to the Sneva Ditch, which is the highest point of diversion on Cow Creek. The fire burned right up to it. It's been used as the fire break. Luckily, those irrigated pastures between Gold Mountain Fire and really the populated areas that are just to the east of my house kind of kept that fire at bay, which was great for me. It gave me a great point of view that I can go up and look at it in the evening and see where the fire is really burning. I think the good news is that the fire didn't completely burn through all these areas. It jumped across Baldy, burned up a lot of oak brush, which is again fine by me. All these areas burned up some deadfall that probably has been sitting there for 50 years. But water resources wise, I do know that CPW got into Nate Creek and did a salvage on some cutthroat trout that exist in that drainage and they wanted to protect. So I'm glad they were able to do that, protect that population of cutthroat. We have a bunch of local calls. I think last year was our first time to have a local call in the Uncompahgre, and this year we have 4 ditches on call. It kind of tells you how bad things have gotten. The unfortunate thing is our planning for this. I feel like across the board, I've seen some great reaction by water users that have known that this is coming. They got water on early, they shut off early, they're planning for an early hay season. Others didn't. Others thought that because this year was short, this is the year to use more water or to divert more water. I'm not really sure what the emphasis was there, but that was quickly solved by the creeks just running dry, so that put a stop to that. So our water management hasn't been great. Ridgeway Reservoir's honestly been fine. Uncompahgre hasn't been pulling as hard on it as they normally do. The water users, which is left water in storage, where I think we're still at 77% or something, but it's pretty normal. And it didn't fill, but honestly, Ridgeway Reservoir's recreation is we see an increase in users if the reservoir isn't full. So if it's about 75%, that's the sweet spot because you have a lot of beach area. But we're seeing a lot of use, I think, because other places don't have water, as Al mentioned. Same thing for the Uncompahgre fishery below Ridgway Reservoir. The unfortunate thing there is that fishery just isn't as great as it once was. With other streams having closures like the Colorado, probably more users are coming to the Uncompahgre because it's tailwater fishery, so the temperatures are controlled. But the habitat there has really been impacted by years of overuse and kind of need to go through a restoration program to put those banks back together. So there's not a lot of fish in there. So a lot of fishermen, not a lot of fish. And I do think we've seen some cancellations just because of the smoke and the fires at the state park. I don't think in the past 10 years, we've had 3 days where the campground below Ridgway Reservoir isn't being completely full. I think it's the most popular state park in the state of Colorado. And this year, there are vacant campsites, which is a weird thing to see. And I think it's probably because, they can see the fire right there in Erie County and the smoke and all the other impacts. Yeah, but this year, the wind, that's the big change. And we've seen the wildlife changes. Obviously it's not unusual to have bears all over our communities, but more this year. And elk in the low country. We've had herds of elk along the riverbeds, river bottoms, all summer long. It's really a strange thing to see. I've got a herd of bulls that live across from my house now in the middle of summer. It's just strange, but it's been a rough year. Hopefully it does rain, but I'm not going to count on it.
Thank you. I'll echo a lot of what was being said. Same thing up in Grant County that way. Would like to take one step back. State of the River, I believe we were either the last one or second to last, maybe someone was after us. But staff did a fantastic job. Appreciate everyone that came up to do that presentation. There was a lot of truth spoken at that, a lot of harsh realities with the drought situation. It was an eye opener for a lot of us, what we were going to be faced with and everything. With that being said, between Division 5, Colorado River District, what was happening down in Mesa County with the big ditches and stuff there was a tremendous amount of cooperation that came out of this. The HEP, early in the process, we learned more about water rights this year than we ever have. Harsh realities. Those of us in the Colorado River thought, we're senior to the world. We're okay. We found out we're junior to the world in so many ways. And had it not been for what was occurring down in the Grand Valley, and their relaxation of their full water rights allowed a free river situation, which allowed for storage at the headwaters, which allowed the ATP to be built back up, allowed Denver to store, as well as the River District, as well as Northern. With all that, now we're seeing those releases. We're seeing those benefits from that relaxation. The Grand Valley is going to be full because of it. We're seeing more recreational flows right now because of it. We're the agriculture that was done up in Grand County. We completely benefited from this cooperation that was done and the work by the River District and truly Division 5. It allowed for that to happen. Had it not been for that cooperation, we'd all been in a bad situation. One of the questions that was asked in our April meeting was about the HEP and the domestic users. There was roughly 300 domestic users. Who were they? What were they? I think the digging that it took to find out that was a true eye opener. Hopefully those records will be kept for the next time we have something like this occur. But that truly, the cooperation that came out of this was tremendous. And I cannot thank, it wasn't just one area. It was the main stem that put this together. And I don't think we can thank our neighbors enough for what occurred out of this. And there was sacrifice. There'll be sacrifices on the upper end. I think the HEP is getting ready to go off, at least from a irrigation perspective. the River District achieved what they wanted, which was that one crop up there. And we can't thank everyone enough on that. At a local level on some of the drainages, there was complete cooperation there also. Senior water rights were saying, okay, junior water right, as long as you can return that water back to the creek or immediately back to the next ditch, use it. And because of that, the troublesome valley and the muddy valley, for the most part, will raise hay crops. Williams Fork, a little different situation up there, didn't have the moisture. With the call that came on, or the relaxation, Denver was able to store a lot of the Williams Fork Valley at that point in time. Couldn't use the water because of the storage aspect, but it's still a net benefit to the system. And I think that's the thing that we've got to look at, is that cooperation. Talked about a little bit about the rafting right now. Kremling, Winter Park, the rafting industry right now is doing extremely well because of these releases from the reservoirs. That's probably going to end sooner than later. So they better enjoy their run while they can, but at least we're seeing a lot of use right now on the river and everything. Actually, right now, on our place on the Colorado River, the water's at its highest level of all year, and it's because of those releases. Tremendous, I can't emphasize it enough, that tremendous cooperation. Some of the things we were seeing, maybe from a somewhat negative perspective, it was a realization of the fire danger. We're like everyone, stage 2. The one thing that a lot of the local businesses that sell the bundles of firewood, they're not allowed to sell them. And people were upset. Well, we want to have a fire tonight. Well, you can't. Didn't you read the sign out in front? So they finally started pulling all these little bundles of firewood and putting them out back because of the fact that people were wanting them to use them, you know, not knowing, not listening, not paying attention. And, you know, sometimes we adapt and move on. And make those adjustments to fit everything. There is going to be a harsh reality, at least from the agriculture perspective this fall, as to what individual ranches will be doing with their herds and stuff. Everyone's going to be in their own boat trying to figure that out, and it's going to be difficult. Francie brought up something very interesting in the sense of the Aspen ski area. I think we're seeing the same thing with Winter Park. The harsh reality is, here it is. Well, you know, it was a slow year and stuff, but businesses will be affected by long range. I do think with the cooperation, we're seeing a little bit of a boost on the rafting side of it, which was extremely positive. But yet, here we are. We're back to getting the water, and I think when the reservoir storage relaxes and we don't have it anymore, it'll come back to roost where the river truly is. But enough said on the cooperation. Grand County in a nutshell. A lot of water still going east through that. I believe there's 500 second feet going through the system still east. Harsh reality, but you know, that would certainly been a benefit to the Colorado main stem if we could have had some of that going this way. But can't say enough. But you know, thank you to the River District technical staff, Andy, Peter, for all the work that's been done. And what we have learned this year has been truly amazing in terms of water rights. Thank you.
Well, thanks. Well, Montrose County is about the same as all of you. We do have enough water. We farm in the unconfirmed water users area. I suppose we're just a little above half the grounds that could be farmed. You know, we started out spraying at 50%, and most of these guys decided to just lay some of the ground aside. You know, the rocky ground, some of the poorer ground got laid aside. They're farming what they consider the best ground, which, you know, makes good sense. It will impact pasture as was mentioned by Rover. Everybody's just in the kind of hang on and let's see what happens mode. I don't think there's any long range planning going on. Some of the cowmen are deciding what they're gonna do. Row croppers are looking around thinking, well, hell, if it doesn't get a lot better, there's not much point. But farmers and ranchers are the original optimists. They're looking over the horizon saying, well, hell, it's bound to get better. And, hopefully it will. It feels to me a little bit like, the gambling addiction guy that's in Vegas takes the last little clump of money and says, okay, that's it. If I don't make it, we're broke, we're gonna leave. If I do make it, well, I'll be back to gambling again tomorrow. And it feels like that. It's quite an awakening from an area that's never been short of water. I mean, we've been short, but we've never done anything like was done this year. So it's gonna be an interesting fall and winter. And when they're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars to convince you to not farm, there may be some that decide they don't want to farm this next go around. And not much we can do about it because it is a private property issue. So we'll see what happens with that. I guess I was raised by optimists. Let's wait and see what happens next year. The horizon's got to get better. So that's all I've got today. Thanks. Take a break or let's take a 10-15 minute break and then let's try and get this wrapped up. Okay.
Take off and go to a meeting up in Aspen. Great to see you all.
Thank you,
See
Francis.
Sonny at the water congress.
Yeah.
When he took
I
his
got a
cattle
bet
to
going on.
Thompson
Yeah.
Valley.
Good. All right, we've got a report coming here. Thank you, ladies.
Community Funding Partnership.
Okay, today we have a brief program update to talk through with the board and then 3 action items which we'll cover. 1 is a grant extension and 2 are applications to the Community Funding Partnership. But before we dive in, Amy and I are going to talk through program updates from the view of this current drought.
Yeah, so we have a few recommendations and program updates that we'll spend a little bit of time in out, so you'll see those in your memo. But wanted to just touch on, and I think this is timely coming after the director reports of this theme that also came up this morning at the Information and Outreach Committee, that the River District has been an agency of action over this drought period. CFP has been a reflection of that, and Melissa's role of not only did we set aside the $450,000 to help support releases and some of the drought response measures, but CFP has also played a role in being available to communities, being a point of contact to try and get them through this drought and think about long-term strategies. And so the recommendations that we want to talk through with you is really how do we continue to show up for our communities, both in this acute drought stage, but also set up these long-term conversations, whether it's wildfire recovery, looking at drought response plans, looking at redundant water sources. And I want to thank Melissa for just a huge role she has played in being, one of the first people that folks call when they're looking for support, and whether we are the first line with the CFP program or whether we, help expedite or point people to where they need to go. That's a huge role that we have played, and thank you to Melissa for being that trusted source for so many of our water users. But with that, I'm going to let Melissa walk through 2 recommendations as we work with water users that we wanted to get some feedback and discuss with the board in terms of how we operate the program.
Okay, so one thing Amy and I have been talking about is we have countless phone calls with water users that are communicating needs, obstacles, worries, etc. And it's important for us to tell you what we're hearing. And one of them has proven very clear and somewhat urgent in that our water providers, domestic and municipal, are facing a reality of rising costs, increased demands, and a lack of state and federal funding. And this year has proven ever more difficult to ensure that they can ensure clean water to every tap. So, you know, CFP recognizes this, and it has for the past 5 years, that we need to play a role here. And so we do provide funds to municipal projects up to 10% of the total cost of the project. But looking at this year and looking at the needs of our communities and their ever more obstacles that are facing them in ensuring providing water to their users, we as staff are prepared to accept or look into applications that CFP can cover up to 20% of the total cost of the project. Originally, it was 10% because these projects are expensive. They're widespread. Our funds cannot cover these. But knowing that we are facing ever more challenges today, this is a need in our community and something that we have heard. Now, this is just one of the immediate levers that we've looked for to see how CFP can play a role. It's a growing problem. Do we feel that CFP can solve this? No. But do we need to be at the table? Yes. So just kind of here to look for board direction or immediate thoughts on that when it comes to providing support for drinking water providers as they face ever more challenges. I will say this year there have been phone calls where they don't have enough water, they don't have the right infrastructure, and they don't have sufficient storage. So really looking at those critical needs when it comes to ensuring water is provided is one thing we're looking for.
Mr. Chair, are we talking, I know a lot of these projects can be the engineering phase and then the construction phase. Are we looking at it from a total project perspective, or are you looking at it from those two components, 20%? Engineering, 20%. Gotcha.
Thanks for asking that. Our accelerator grants will entertain up to 85% of the cost of engineering. So that's different. This is more construction when they're needing to put in a redundant water source or whatever it may be.
And I think just to add that, you know, considering increasing our, you know, partnership and percentage isn't an automatic 20%. We still have to look at, you know, all of the factors of, you know, what are their rates? What is their ability to pay? How are they continuing to be a catalyst? What is our fund balance as a whole with CFP? Like Melissa said, largely the 10% is because these projects are so costly. We can't, as a program and the size of our program, do much more. And so really it just gives us more flexibility of how do we better be at the table for our municipal water providers and meaningfully support the needs there.
Well, Amy, I'm glad you said that. Because you better say up to 20%. These projects, and it seems to me that where you really see inflation is in construction. And very few projects come in below or at budget. So I would use the language up to. The other problem is that, you know, we need to carefully define in kind, you know, burden sharing. And we have an applicant that comes to us that has a tax base, but they just don't want to go ask their constituents for the tax. They want us to write the checks. And the more checks we write, the more people we're going to have. And we only have 25 people work for our staff. Yesterday, we were talking about things that, you know, where we could help and, you know, I don't want us to do, we're doing such a great job. I don't want us to dilute what we're doing. I want us to stay, and I'm not saying we're not staying in our lane, but we're expanding the width of the lane. And so I'm sure try and think 3 or 4 years down the road. But the more we advertise that the fish are in our pond, the more fisher people we're going to have, which may be what we want. But at some point, You know, I think in upfront, I think a very clear understanding with the applicant. Look, this isn't a blank check. And when you talk to us about in-kind contributions, tell us specifically what you're speaking of. And you're really putting it on the table. And 3, don't come back or at least give them an idea. If you came back for a second round, oh, you know, this project, federal government pulled out of it now, so we gotta have more from you. Say, well, got a big pot we have to share it with. So I think that's, Jamie, the way you described that is perfect. Thank you, Alvin.
Thank you. I'm gonna support what Director McGinnis had, but I'm gonna add on to it a little bit. I guess and this is a question, is this kind of where these communities had the lack of ability prior to prepare? Is it the lack of preparedness? Is it a lack of foresight? Is it a lack of the communities investing into their water system? Not looking to their vulnerabilities? Because there are security and vulnerability assessments that municipalities of, I think, 2,500 on up are required to do, you know, and that criteria may have changed right now. And water shortages, preparing from source to tap is part of that. So, I want to caution the River District from really stepping into that role because the state has a full responsibility to really work into that role. That is their job to support the municipality in the drinking water system. I'm not saying the River District has the ability to partake in there, but that's part of under the statute of the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. They operate that program. Their funds that were actually allocated for these towns to do what they're doing have been swept by a state saying, no, this is a bigger priority than drinking water and public sanitation. So that account was there through the severance tax and it's been raked. It was there in the amount of about $220 million in 2010, roughly in that era. I might be off on a few years. And now it's scraps. But that's specifically what that was for, was to help fund these impacted towns that are oil and gas impacted, but also through other funds that were with the state to help them do their contingency. So the EPA has jurisdiction with that as well. So there's other federal and state programs that are complex, but they're responsible. And now they're looking for other people to do the work for them instead. So I guess I'm looking at to where if a town needs to have a formal plan on what's the real priority and have that plan vetted by the community one, but also get recommendations from an engineering firm or the operator responsible charge that's in charge of that community to say, this is a priority to get done. And I don't know if that's the conversation you're getting. Are you getting it from the operators? Who's feeding you this information? So I understand towns having shortages, but there's a level of government that should be involved that's just not there anymore because they don't want to be involved because they've lost their finances. But I think the River District should be pushing more to get these, if we're expelling dollars, the state should be expelling even more dollars to get these situations whole.
I'm really glad you brought that up, and it's something that has been on our radar, and this fall we really want to focus on is encouraging these communities to start planning in the future and really think through that this year is not going to be an anomaly. And so how do you prepare for the future, and what plans do you not have in place?
A water master plan is invaluable.
Sonia?
Yeah, I'll agree with everything Scott and all them indicated too. You guys know that I've been an advocate for just being a partner in there at some level, you know, feeling, and then in the INO meeting, we heard this morning that really that the way a lot of our population resonates with us in the district is through their connection, through their drinking water supply. But all the same cautions, like avoiding those other sources because they may be harder to get is not an okay reason to come to the district with a huge expense, or when there's a county or municipality who's not putting up significant cash match because for whatever reason, I don't think that's a role for the district to fill that entire gap. I think that we need to be vetting those, but I think planning is a first step, the same way we do with the irrigation companies and their ditch systems, the same way if we can support that municipal water supply planning, that's another great role for us to be that initial seed to get those projects going and moving forward. Thank you.
I'd be happy to help you facilitate any conversation with that as you move forward. This is what I've done for a lot of decades, so happy to do what I can to help you. So please feel free to reach out.
Would be great.
I've got a question. What kind of requests are you getting from people when they called you this?
This summer specifically, we've received requests of new storage tanks, upgrading diversions so that they're more efficient in the face of lower flows, putting in redundant water sources because their original source has dried up.
Well, it's not redundant after the first one dried up.
This is true. Plan B.
And I do think it, you know, it aligns with what we saw in Division 5 too, of working with our H2P beneficiaries and working with, you know, augmentation sources that, you know, we hit territory that we never thought we would hit. And so it's how do we better, you know, use this as a call to action with our CFP program. And I think working on the planning role and really pushing in that direction it's a good step for us that we can take.
Yeah, the policies want to be modified because if you go back to what it doesn't say disadvantage, it says water quality disadvantaged communities. It doesn't say disadvantage, it's the other word. Underserved, so just maybe think about that too. Yeah.
Another new acronym that might be helpful is we're frontier communities too. Frontier is a new acronym that's actually being pushed out by the federal governments into these more remote areas. So rather than disadvantaged, you're frontier, which even puts you at more of a disadvantage.
That's a new one.
It is a new one, but
that.
it's being used, so.
Interesting.
Is that because they want Elon to get more federal money? Next frontier.
The final.
Community Frontier Partnership. Okay. Moving on. Stay in this realm of CFP using whatever levers it has to figure out how we can support our communities with this next discussion. So one element that we have found in the last year is that through our mitigation efforts for the drought, we have given 450 to the Colorado Main Stem, among other large projects. Last year, we talked about our geographic targets by basin and came to the board and said, hey, we've rebalanced them. We have a model that we use as a guide generally to watch on how we can ensure that there's balance among our basins. And this past year, the Colorado Main Stem has received a fair amount of funding. And so we are a bit out of balance when it comes to the Yampa White Green and the Gunnison basins. You'll see on the PowerPoint on the left is this general guide we use that incorporates agriculture, population, amount of funding that's provided to CFP. And on the right is where we are today. So instead of putting a moratorium on projects in the Colorado Main Stem, we're thinking about a different route. Can we further incentivize more projects in the Yampa White Green and the Gunnison? And one of the levers that we're interested in using, and we love board direction, is this idea of can we entertain up to 60% of the total cost of projects when they come to us from the Yampa White Green and the Gunnison Basin. 60% is a lot. And I want to recognize that CFP was built as a tool to be a catalyst for other funding. Our accelerator grants are a great representation of this use. And there's also a need right now for projects to get done today. And they do not have to have time to wait for state or federal funding, which often takes 6 months to a year to receive and get funding on the ground. Sometimes projects need to get done quickly. So our thought is when we receive a request, kind of looking through, obviously, does it meet our 5 categories and our framework? Does it have reasonable urgency? And what is the total project cost when we determine if we can fund up to 60% of the total cost of the project? On average, right now, we fund up to 30% of the total cost of the project. This is, again, another tool trying to figure out, hey, how can we be more nimble and increase our funds on the ground when it comes to the Yampa White Green and the Gunnison and meet where the communities where they're at. So would love board direction on this. This is another just a nimble tool when it comes to the drought. Yes.
So let me ask Ian, as we update this, how do we do the accounting so for the project that we commit to at some point in the future? But we don't make the payment all at once, or do we then? Is that a contingent liability? So it gives us an idea, okay, here's our balance, but look, we've got these many commitments against it. Kind of like the housing thing. How do we
Yes.
account for what's happening?
Well,
If we do those kind of.
Melissa does a great job of creating the budget, the CFP budget every year, where she tries to schedule those payments, if you will. We do not encumber those contracts. But I mean, between the team, we know kind of what the fund balance is and what is coming, what's on the schedule to be paid out.
And these are pretty dramatic, even 10 to 20, now 60. And we're going into the future. And we're in projects, we're in a field where prices escalate. Even when inflation drops, they still escalate, generally speaking. And I just want us to have a good grasp so we don't get ourselves in our own bind, or we end up not being able to do not a lot, but for a lot of people versus doing a lot for fewer people. And I think we need to balance it out. I don't have any problem balancing regions. It's just, wow. And I think one of the questions we need to ask is, you brought up, Alden, you brought it up, and what's their capability? And I'll tell you the other thing, once they get used to visiting us, it's pretty tough to tell them, you need to move on now, or you need to kind of move to the next group. We're just, man, so I think you kind of give it the grip. That's a big jump up to 60%. And at least when I was in public office, I never had anybody come in and tell me a bad story. Everybody came in, and you mentioned early on, it has to be done now. It always had to be done. And I never had any department in the history of my public service tell me they had enough. When they knew we had money, they never had enough. So I just want to make sure we got some checks and balances, and I love your enthusiasm, but what are the consequences, or unintended consequences coming out of our wallet? It's designed for multiple purposes.
Director McGinnis, I can just answer the fund balance. I think that's a great question, because we of course we're looking in every year in our budget. But also internally, we look at our budget as if we encumber all of our awards in the year that they were awarded, so that we keep a very close eye on not just the total fund balance that's in our bank account, but also the obligations that we have made as staff. And so, yes, this would operate within, what we have allocated per year for CFP, so that we keep a very close eye on that. And I think that is a component of this discussion of, is one of these immediate tools that we can deploy quickly to take a look at our geographic targets. But again, doesn't mean it's an automatic funding to that level. It's something that, we creatively want to look at so that we can still make a meaningful impact and support our communities in those other basins.
Sonia?
Just kind of brainstorming here, in the Upper Gunnison Basin, we've done a lot of really good planning over the last 5 years and really have these plans that identify specific projects. And I wonder if there was an opportunity within a community to prioritize a sub-basin where you have a number of different projects that it would essentially result in kind of balancing out some of those figures. And, I'm just thinking of the tour we just did with the, in the East River Basin with the CWCB, where you have projects, the Mount City Water and Sand with the storage, and then just over the hill, you have the Wildfire Ready Action Plan projects that were proposed, and burying that town pipeline underneath the stream rather than have it sitting above. If you could And we had a few years to get those done, maybe thinking about what that timeline you might get to, so the fields that you can contract with, fields can be completed within a 3-year timeframe. Maybe, I don't know how you guys look at timeframes when you're looking at CFP projects, like, don't bring it to me until it's ready to go already, or maybe, what is the likelihood or high potential of it going forward or something like that, so. Just a thought, when folks have regional plans that they can actually draw to identify projects and put them into a bundle. Could it go to a conservancy district or something where you have 3 projects you want to get done and you have a 3-year time period and you're committed to those? Is that a good way to kind of get that money out there? Accelerate those projects, and then if they have the seed money, it allows them to maybe better fundraise moving forward. Spend the money. Thank you.
I'll follow up with one more little piece. And I'm not gonna build upon Sonia's because I think she's onto something there, just brainstorming, but the other piece is, in my report, I talked about the ditches that we identified, that there's some, and that's just an example I'm going to use. Is there the same level of river district involvement across the basins on your pie chart? Is that the same to where if you're spending 80 hours here, or you're doing 80 hours across to where that same level exposure? Because we got folks that they know you're there, but yet they don't really know you're there. They know you're there when you're at the State of the White River or you're at the Basin Roundtable meeting. But that's the Basin Roundtable is a fairly narrow niche, but if you're at the State of the White River, it's a little bit broader. But really, do you got to get to some of these smaller boards, these ditch companies, or the conservation districts and say, this is what's there? Those conservation districts, they're the ones that these people that need projects like this one right here, you have on the screen, they're the ones that are typically the front line saying, where do I go? Or myself, where do I go? I know where I send them. I give them your phone number, and also USDA's. So if you're not getting the exposure, you may not be getting the same level of participation. And I'm not saying you're not, but I'm saying that's something that maybe if you should maybe take a look at. And that might be an area to where instead of the 60%, just say, I'm going to increase 10% more of our time to the upper Yampa or the lower Yampa or wherever, the upper Gunnis, the lower Gunnis. I don't know. So just things along that nature. That might be more helpful than actually giving away more money. Because if people don't know you're there.
Well, I think even in places like Hinsdale County and stuff where they don't have a lot of irrigation infrastructure and stuff we're looking at, the challenge is their water and wastewater infrastructure. And so, right, is there a way to kind of maybe help prioritize, facilitate, get those projects going? But I think even reach out more to those very rural communities that are struggling with some of that stuff. And they may never come in with a big piping project or something, but it might be, the priorities might just be a little bit different. They might have more urgency.
Thank you. Yeah, I would.
I would just say, I think that we can certainly try to increase our concentration on the outlying areas as you suggested, Alan. I think that makes sense. I do think we do quite a bit of that. Can always do more. I'm just thinking about your county in particular. I've had conversations with some of your county commissioners as well as with you about opportunities to modernize some of the ditches and our potential involvement in that and helping the local population realize that we can help with that so that when there's a fall on the river that they're not used to, they can still operate their ditches in a way. We can help them do the right engineering and do the right, implement the check structures and other things that will allow them to continue to irrigate without the full ditches that they're used to without a call. Mm-hmm. So there are lots of things we can do and we are trying to get through. This goes to all of our directors. You guys know your communities. We need your help in the referrals, and I appreciate, Al, you referring your water users, but to the extent that they're putting new lands, either new or renewed lands under irrigation, and they need help, those kind of things, we're happy to step in and we're present, but how can we be more effective is really the question. And we're always happy to do that. So if you're having, you're aware of people that we should be reaching out to, we're happy to be proactive. We don't just sit by the phone and wait for them to call us. So, happy to continue to do that.
If I can be more specific then on where, a lot of what we're running into is, and I believe Director Chavez used to do this, where when you work for NRCS, you would develop these plans to implement irrigation infrastructure on the specific property. Finding somebody that can create the plan and help them, that's what I see as the critical piece that they can't come up with. USDA provides that service, and I'm being very specific here to agriculture right now. But that's where we see there's a bottleneck. We got an engineering firm out of Craig. You can't get him to do other jobs because this is all he does full time, Will, and he's booked. But this is what he's trying to do, is try to facilitate these conversations, but the River District might help find a firm or help find some funding to get that center pivot plan and diversion plan set up for them, or where a ditch piping of a certain section for them to help get that engineer on the ground, because that engineer is going to help them take the next step to apply for additional funding to here or the state or whoever it might be. But that's what I even see with the towns, these little, very small towns. They don't have the expertise or the ability to hire an engineer to help them come up with a plan and do an assessment of their property on the best management practice for that square of land.
You bring up the topic of capacity, and it's capacity of our partners. And it's something that's been on our radar. I know Zane has it on his radar, and something that we've been talking through because it's the linchpin of impact and something we need to look closely at. And the question of what gaps do we fill? And then the bigger question, how do we help encourage our partners to be more impactful and have the right capacity? So
I think they just need a roadmap. I think that sounds simple in my terms from me, but I have not heard an engineering firm turn me or anybody else away, other than where I talked about with Will doing his stuff. That's just because he's a single man outfit, These other firms, we'll figure it out. We'll get it in there. So.
So as someone from one of these counties, I have to ask, what is the reason do you think that there's less? The matrix getting outside of the air, why?
it's not that there's less projects, there's less bigger, expensive projects. The Colorado Main Stem had Shoshone, it had our drought releases, so that's more of what we're looking towards. And as Sonia Chavez has brought up so many times, like just the nature of projects, especially in Gunnison and Moffett, et cetera, are smaller. So we kind of just need more than larger.
So do we should look at ourselves and do we really want to do affirmative action? Basically saying we don't care about creating equal opportunity. We've created equal opportunity in all of our counties. We want to create equal outcomes. In order to do that, we're just going to up the percentage. That doesn't make sense to me. I want to be consistent with my ideology anyway. That doesn't make sense. I'll fight 100% for my county's ability to have equal opportunity. I don't like this idea. That's just me.
Well, I think, Tom, sometimes too, right, it's access to engineers or where you have to bring them from in order to fill those gaps, because in small communities, I think sometimes you don't have those, and we saw that in the RCPP project where we had to really get firms that we could ensure would be able to reach across all of those areas, and it was expensive because you're pulling them from Grand Junction or somewhere to come into your community. I mean, I think we've been lucky, I think, within, Gunnison County and the Upper Gunnison District that and when I learned this from the RCPP project was pulling in an engineer and having them do those pre-feasibility and cost estimation things, because those entities those landowners didn't have the capacity to do that stuff, or hiring and finding someone, paying for it. We could at least get that started and give them a little push into it. And so I think creating
differently.
And right, and that's why we've been able to come to the board with these big bundled projects. Like we get a bunch done on the ground, get them going, find the funding, help them do that. But I think just the resources and the access to that have been really important getting projects in the ground. Right? I mean, not that everybody has opportunity, but I think because we've been able to do that, we've really been able to push projects towards CFP. And having resources like Trout Unlimited, because we have limited capacity at the Upper Gunnison District, Trout Unlimited's been a great partner in getting those combined ag multi-benefit projects in the ground for us. And I don't think we'd be accomplishing what we're accomplishing without that kind of a partner there. So just some thoughts.
Well, it's here that there's just not big projects.
They're smaller.
We're doing the little projects. We don't have any big projects, right? We have the Mayville. Mayville headgate, but, anyway.
I would just say, I think we're hearing, and I think our staff's hearing, pushing the percentage of cost is not probably the way to go. We can go back to the table and look. I do think figuring out how to increase that outreach and get that initial capacity, right? And that initial, a lot of, Al, if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly is, look, a lot of these old NRCS programs and funding, they want to do the engineering, but they don't have the staff to do the engineering. So how do we fund an outside engineer to get it done and then move on to the next level where the feds will help pay for that project and then we can come in with our standard percentage and help the cost match.
Front loading
Yeah.
is very beneficial
Yes.
anymore.
Yeah.
Especially, and that's where our federal government is going.
Right.
That's what they want.
Right. So I think we can work on that. And I think this has been a very valuable conversation. I do want to keep moving because we're behind time. So.
Okay, action items. We have 3 action items today. The first one is a unique one. In our CFP framework, it does state that if an awardee does not contract within 2 years of being awarded, we need to go back to the board and previously approved by the board for a request for a grant extension as recommended by staff. So we have an example here, the Sheriff Reservoir Dam Rehabilitation Project under the town of Oak Creek as the applicant was approved in 2024 for a little over $232,000. Over the past 2 years, they have had difficulties in fundraising due to the fluctuations in federal funding that was available. The great news is that it is now available and they have secured $4.9 million. They have a final gap of $600,000, which is currently under an application to DOLA, and they feel confident that this will come through. So because they have raised considerable funding, they have momentum, we are recommending extending this grant to October 15th, 2028.
I'll start because I'm quite familiar with this project. I've been with it since it came before me when I was on the chair of the roundtable. But also working with Rio Blanco County, working through their FEMA that they had identified, and that's since been resolved here in the past several months. I don't know the exact date. But simply put, an extension is not necessarily because of their doing as another entity's doing. So I'm fully supportive and will gladly speak up for Rio Blanco County that we support this effort to get it done.
Make the motion.
I make the motion to approve the extension for them. So, and personally, this needs to get done.
Yeah, I second. That's great.
All in favor?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passed.
Wait, who was the second?
Tom.
Sorry.
Okay, technically board action number 2, even though it says 1, Southside Conservation District is creating and doing a project essentially to modernize a bundle of ditches in their area. This is a unique project and one that we're excited to be on receive an application for. They are applying for an accelerator grant. They are working with Farmers Conservation Alliance. They have identified 7 ditches within the Divide Creek drainage that need a modernization. This is going to be completed through a SCADA assessment, water loss assessment, feasibility design for 1 to 2 projects per ditch. and then take that bundle and apply for a larger federal grant to cover the costs of engineering and construction for these projects. We've seen an example of this before in the White River Basin. Farmers Conservation Alliance worked with a bundle of ditches to apply for PL 566, really drawing on these larger federal fundings, thinking creatively and accessing dollars that are often difficult to obtain. Same story, aging infrastructure, need for efficiency, really important agriculture up there, and communities that are willing to be a part of this and want to think creatively. Overall, we are recommending a full approval of this grant, which is $73,000 for this project that represents 16% of the total cost of the project. So using CFP funds to draw on federal funding, using our accelerator grants in a creative way is what brought support from our staff.
Questions? No questions. We need a motion.
Second.
Tom, second by Alvin. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passed.
Okay, our last one is the Lake Avery Reservoir Enlargement Feasibility Study. This is a request from Yellow Jacket Water Conservancy District with partnership of Rio Blanco County serving as the fiscal agent. Lake Avery is located east of Meeker and currently has an opportunity to explore, can they expand the reservoir by 10,000 acre feet or up to 10,000 acre feet. This has been on Yellow Jacket's radar for many years. They have completed a fair amount of studies to figure out what is the need in the basin. Al already mentioned this earlier. The White River is over appropriated and is looking for solutions. Just a study in 2017, an augmentation study, they found that there was a need for about 4,000 acre feet in augmentation water. It's a few years old now, so definitely probably much higher than that today. This feasibility study is going to look at a lot. It's going to look at what is the availability of water when it comes to water rights, geotechnical conditions, spillway outlet infrastructure, impacts to existing infrastructure, permitting, probable costs, you name it, to see can they expand this reservoir to meet the needs of the White River. I will say that this year is a great example that on the Colorado, we had the levers to support our community through our drought releases. We did not have this in the White, and they did not have this option. And so this is an opportunity for us to look into creative ways to supporting access to further water sources and water security for the White River Basin. Overall, staff is supportive of this. I will say that it's a unique one in that Yellow Jacket Water Conservancy District is working with Rio Blanco County. They have an MOU. Is it clear in the future who's going to take the lead on this project and the steps forward afterwards? No. So part of this is working with the county and Yellow Jacket to identify those next steps and who's willing to take the lead on it if it is deemed feasible. This project includes a project coordinator to work among all the parties, noting that the reservoir is owned by CPW as well. CPW has approved this process of a feasibility study and is at the table and willing to be a part of the conversation. Overall, we are in support of $109,000 towards this project.
Yeah, I just want to say, we're aware of some potential warts on the project in terms of the stability of the dam, the hydrological yield of the basin, but it is an important project that county's reached out to us extensively about it. And so we think it's worthy of an investment. There's a capacity issue in terms of where the project would go. we think this is one of the projects that there is a clear need, whether this is the solution or not. I don't think is a clear answer, and that's really what this early, feasibility study is about. And so this is not hey, this project is guaranteed to go through the end, but they're never gonna know if they're able to go if we don't get answers to these questions up front.
Yeah, but the biggest, oh, I'm sorry, Glenn. Well, the biggest hurdle is the acquiring of the property around there.
Yeah.
I mean, the engineering feasible, it's feasible, and there's always things that need to be engineered, but I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but I do have the question. It's been on the table a long time, and there's been significant pushback from the property owners that say, no way.
There's an obstreperous landowner next door, or maybe just a landowner who cares about their property next door. So whatever they are, but yeah, yeah.
And so, I guess I'm more asking, what do we do in situations like where we know that's the hurdle? It isn't the engineering or whether it's a feasible project. It's a landowner that says, no, not over my dead body, and I'm not ready to die yet.
I think that this feasibility study is needed. Getting those answers, Tom, and really, I mean, there's the potential that the advocates or owners of this water right may already have conceded some issues in their prior water rights cases that we really need answers on.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
they have. Okay.
That answered one of my questions. My other question was, how much does the reservoir store now and how much is being used for augmentation today?
Stores about 76, I'm sorry. It's about 7,700 acre feet of water. And right now there's zero augmentation water in there. That's the conversation during my report that we're actually moving towards, is to start with an augmentation pool. That's with Yellow Jacket and CPW cooperating with that as well, with the potential to maybe expand upon that. They do have that 5 and 10 year release as well, that they have the capabilities of with the state. But really, it's a recreation pool and to serve as some temperature control or in-stream flow use for that in-stream flow reach from Beaufort down to Piens Creek.
So we're looking for a motion.
Yeah. I'd make a motion to approve it. I'm quite familiar with this project. I know quite a bit about it. I've done my own research, so. And I do believe that there's a lot of pieces sitting all over. There's a lot of stars out there that need to be grabbed, and it needs organized because it needs aligned because it's highly disorganized. There's so much out there. And it needs to be put into one piece, and that's where I believe this is gonna go. And it's gonna give some direction to some people in our county that are desperately looking for some additional supplies.
Is that all the motion, or is it just the motion?
No, that's just the motion. No, I'm sorry if I went above and beyond, but the motion is to support it, but I want to give some rationale behind it just from my experiences working in the White River Basin, so. It needs to be resolved.
Pastor, second.
We need a second.
Second.
Jerry Martinez. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion passed.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move right on to external affairs, information and outreach update. Matt.
Thank you, directors. I know many of you were here for most of the information and outreach committee meeting this morning. I'd like to provide an opportunity for Director Chavez, the chair of that committee, to provide a report out before we begin external affairs.
Yeah, and so we met this morning as part of the INO committee and talked a bit about just hearing some more from staff about just their goals for the 2026 outreach program, and then had a specific focus conversation on our digital media outreach. And I'll let you guys report out from that, and then I might follow up with just a few comments after that, if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. We covered a lot of the tactics around our digital outreach and education campaign to promote awareness of the Colorado River District and its projects, and specifically the Shoshone permanency effort. And some shared insights, some things we learned, some successes we had in delivering high volume of messaging to across our 15 counties. And much of that continues on, and where we go from here in light of the district receiving the release of the $40 million from the federal government. So happy to provide additional information, updates, questions on that material. Hopefully you still continue to see that out in the wild and on the radio and in the print and through the PR efforts and all the other channels that we use, as well as some promotion of our News Drop newsletter that has recently begun as a component, an add-on to that campaign. So
I think just a general message to directors on how important it is for us to hear from you, not just within the board meetings, but to give staff a call, reach out to them if you have different ideas or there's upcoming events where you think that we can have an impact and reach a good number of people. Please make the time to call staff. You're also welcome to call me and share your ideas with me as well. But we really do rely on our directors to be able to help inform the work that the district does and where we're hitting the mark and where we're missing it. So please reach out. Just real quick, looking ahead, I know you all have this on your calendars. It got moved around a little bit. So for the 5th or 6th time, just make sure that your calendar is reflecting September 18th is our annual seminar. We had to bump a week back just because of some venue reservation issues, but it all got sorted out and everything is going to be fantastic. I've already had an early response, very strong from stakeholder invitations. We're almost at 100 registrants already, which is great. And I think I'll work with Stephanie and we'll make sure to get you sort of a copy of an invitation that you can share within your networks, which would be much appreciated, to try to welcome anyone who's interested in attending. We're going to have a strong focus on obviously some interstate issues. We'll have a lot of new information coming from the Bureau and from the interstate level between now and September, but we have a robust panel plan to really dive into that. As always, the lens is how will this impact the Western Slope and what is the River District doing to support its constituents in these times? We're going to have focus on some of the great work that's been done through the agriculture stakeholders in various basins to try to react and deal and problem solve with drought in real time. Looking at a climatologist's bird's eye expert view of what happened this year and what are the questions experts are still asking and wondering. How can they put the puzzle pieces together to look around the corner next year, see what climate's doing. And then also maybe a look at some municipal providers. And we touched on this a little bit with information and outreach this morning. What ways were people getting the word out about how we have to change our approach to drought in the current conditions? So the agenda will be finalized the next week or two and posted on the website. Right now, it's a bit of a blind phase of preparation, but I promise it'll be worth everyone's time. So again, keep your eye out in your inbox for information to share in your networks there.
We just mentioned
Yep.
that Friday, September 18th, for those of you who are politically oriented, happens to also be the Club 20 steak fry. And given that it's an election year, there'll be lots of politicians in town for that. So if you're so inclined, you can register for that.
Promote it right now.
If you're not inclined, please come to our thing and leave town.
Steph, could you do us a favor and send, I did not have that date in my calendar. Can we get a calendar invite out to the board just to make sure it's on our
So
we also have budget.
yeah, and the budget meeting will be the day before as well, which I got that one. It's not my world. Okay, I'm just gonna really quickly touch on one other thing. I know we're short on time, and that is just how many places our staff went out to in the last quarter. We attended and presented at about 35 different places, whether it was a ditch tour at Fire Mountain Canal, Grand Junction, Stay of the River. I got to go to Hoover Dam with the Public Affairs Committee with CRUA, our State of the Rivers up and down the main stem, kind of in May, they were centered mostly there. We have a lot of just various stakeholder perspectives. We try to engage with policymakers at all levels. We had a chance to present on the State Drought Task Force tour. Melissa and Amy spent a lot of time in the field, getting to know the projects and the successes.
and where our money's being invested. Getch's Wilkinson Conference, Amy presented on a panel there. And this is just a short summary. This isn't even all of them. They're listed in your memo if you want to see more. And then ending this, here we had, of course, some big news in May, which oddly enough has not been talked about a lot in this meeting. I know we've covered it a million times, but I added one more slide in as celebration for that work, especially the work of our congressional delegation in helping lobby for that money and speak up on behalf of the Western Slope across the aisle. And Zane and Andy had the opportunity to connect with Representative Hurd and Senator Bennett in May after that celebration. And then I think, unless I'm missing anything, Matt. Oh, newsletter signups.
After the INO committee meeting in January and the subsequent meeting this morning, we wanted to make mention that the news drop remains an important outlet for our distribution of updates and relevant news. And I know that all of you read every issue and you're waiting with bated breath for it to land in your inboxes, but it is important that we do get a high amount of readership. However, many of the articles included in there are behind the paywall. So you kind of get blocked, right? So you click on it, and like, not signing up for another thing. So we did some research on some options around that, and to save you the long story, I'll cut right to the chase. And our recommended path forward and suggestion is that the directors rely on the resource provided through their county's public library system. And we've collected the resources and links for all 15 counties that provide access to nearly all of the frequently shared news article sources that we include in the news drop. That provides you free paywall access with a free membership, free library card membership. So you register for a library card at your public library, and that allows you to register for free for these news resources. That saves the expense and accounting gymnastics we would have to do for a clipping service or for some of these other maintenance of memberships for individuals. And that's a legal way to access without sharing login information or something like that. So I think we're happy to take questions about that, happy to share those direct links. And, it's also worth mentioning that Denver Public Libraries provides to all Colorado residents a very robust news article access resource. Despite it being on the East Slope, it is okay. It seems to, I think it's a good resource to tap. So I think there may be some remaining news outlets, outliers that may not be included in that. Some combination of things. We would like to mention that we do rely on the news media quite a bit. So that if you do feel inclined, particularly to subscribe to your regional news outlets and pay the typically very small membership dues, it helps those outlets considerably. We have a lot of allies in Western Slope news media that help us distribute our messaging on a regular basis, especially like the Grand Junction Sentinel. So consider it as a membership, as a way to support one of the tools that the River District uses on a regular basis. Happy to take questions, but that's all. So.
How much are we bringing in now from memberships for that news drop?
We don't charge for any memberships, but we have about 7,500 subscribers at this point and growing.
They're paying.
We don't charge for a news drop distribution. It's free to sign up to receive the news drop, and we create it and send it. What I'm referring to is if you click on an article in the news drop, say in the Denver Post, you would get routed to the Denver Post website and then confronted with to read this article, you must log in.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
But nobody reads the Denver.
But we can't. We get to it.
You can if you pay for it.
Even if you do pay for it, sometimes I feel.
Oh, I know, it's
exceedingly difficult.
That's a separate problem.
Matt, you reminded me that one of the messages I wanted to relay from our county commissioners was that love the news drop. How do we help get the information out to more people in our county? Because we feel like the more people that read it in our county, the more people understand situations like this drought year, what can be done about the drought year, the good work the River District's doing. And so they wanted me to ask that question directly to you and see if there's any information that we can help, like use local, like our Uncompahgre Watershed Partnership mailing list or some list that the county has compiled to get this information out. If you have any ideas, I'm all ears.
Yeah, we would love that. I think that kind of extension and syndication of our newsletter would be great. There's a forwarding tool right at the top of the news drop that we can easily forward. And you could subscribe a list to that, or the manager of that list, forward it onto them and encourage them to share that resource. There's some tools embedded in the news drop, and I'm happy to sort of pull those out specifically and send them. If you're interested in, if you want to send me a contact to say, hey, we'd love to make sure these people know about it. we can
Yeah,
do it
definitely
directly.
encourage individual signups. I have had trouble with the distributing to list emails in the past. But we can work on that and send out some things that you could share specifically with Fury County.
Yeah.
Will do.
We need to advertise just to our local elected officials and municipalities to get on the news drop and get registered too, just like setting up,
We mentioned this morning in the INO committee meeting that we used a portion of that advertising budget we're retooling and refocusing. A small portion of that is being dedicated to promoting subscription to the news drop across the Western Slope right now. So it's working. I think I referred to it this morning. We signed up 35 or 40 people yesterday as a result of that effort. So we really want that subscriber base to grow, and we're working on it.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
State affairs.
Thank you all. State affairs update. Pretty straightforward. My memo included a postmortem of the legislative session that wrapped up in May. I sound like a broken record. I think I've been before you 4 or 5 times talking about the budget crisis, and that was really the limiting factor for most bills this year. Any bill with a fiscal note got more scrutiny than I've ever seen at the Capitol. But so that being said, overall, it was a relatively quiet legislative session for water, but there were a handful of emerging trends that we paid attention to. We put at the staff level a lot of work into the bill brought to us by the Lower Arkansas Water Conservancy District, and ultimately got to a position where some of our primary concerns about that bill being limited to Division 2 remained. I testified in front of the committee after some long conversations between Andy and the general manager of the Lower Arkansas Conservancy District, I with their lobbyists and others. And I testified that while our concerns remain, our concerns should not stand between the constituents or the water users in the Lower Arkansas River Valley and the protections that they sought from by and dry and the long-term impacts that exist there. Data center development is quickly becoming the significant emerging water and natural resource issue down there. Neither of the bills that kind of butted up against each other throughout the session made it to the finish line. I think that is a clear signal that we'll have more bills next year. We'll likely see an industry bill again that tries to give tax incentives and deals to the largest, richest industry or fastest growing industry in the nation. And we'll also see some restrictive bills from the environmental community, maybe from CCI or others. So we'll continue to monitor that, and when we start to see drafts, we'll start to bring you all into the loop on that issue. Water Resources and Agriculture Review Committee met on the 25th of last month. I think that their agenda and the topics that they discussed, which are all listed in your memo, are a clear signal that many of our priorities at the district remain front and center for the legislature. Big river issues, conservation programs, interruptible water supply agreements. We're likely to see a bill on that that's brought by some developers on the Front Range. It's next year. I think the budget, at least right now, the budget crystal ball suggests that it's going to be a little bit better than it has been the last couple of years. There's still a lot of runway, and it could get worse between now and budget time next year. But I expect there will be more budget resources to go around, meaning bills will be flying that have fiscal notes and just means the momentum will likely be at a bit of a faster clip next session. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I did flag for you in your memo a potential 2026 ballot measure, proposed initiative 308. It has not been finalized for the ballot yet. It's still in signature gathering phase. But I want to pay attention to that because it does touch on many of the forest health issues that we monitor and recreation funding, other things, just issues that are important, I think, to this board and others. I'm not asking for any direction on it at this point because we don't know if it will be on the ballot, but I'll be prepared to come back to you at your budget meeting with an update on that. And we can discuss it then. And as is customary, we typically, this board considers resolutions on statewide ballot measures that are germane to our interests at that budget meeting. I'll work with Peter and Andy and the team if we feel as though a resolution in support or opposed is warranted. We'll bring that at the budget meeting. So, see if there's anything else. Yeah, any questions on the state affairs memo? Let's move to federal. Productive quarter for the River District and our federal advocacy efforts, I think, particularly with respect to the Shoshone permanency funding. I think the $40 million announcement of that funding, the re-announcement of that funding is, I think, an example of what sustained bipartisan advocacy on a project like this can achieve. While I think you saw on Lindsay's last slide, Senator Bennett and Jeff Hurd were critical and I think consistent advocates for that funding. It was really the coalition here on the ground that and the message of that coalition, the idea of what that coalition consisted of, Mesa County and Pitkin County, ranchers and environmentalists and all of these folks coming together for this. It was that story that ultimately Congressman Hurd and others were able to tell to members of the administration that I think was helped in our success in getting those dollars unfrozen. So something to celebrate. And we still have a little bit of work to do on the funding, as we've discussed already. Got a lot of work to do on the project as a whole, but I expect you all will be invited to some sort of celebration when we get the full funding across the line. We do have a new Bureau of Reclamation Commissioner, Aubrey Betancourt, moved over from USDA NRCS to take the reins. And while her paperwork has not been finalized and a formal nomination isn't in place yet, or the committee hasn't received the formal paperwork for her nomination. We understand that is moving forward, and from everything we and our partners in DC can tell, she is acting as if she will be the commissioner and the nominee, not just an acting commissioner, which is, I think, a breath of fresh air. I think there's a certain amount of authority that comes with a formal nomination and going through that process. I think when the committee, Senate Energy and Natural Resources, gets that paperwork, I expect her nomination to move through pretty quickly. We'll note she has California ties. She represented the almond growers there as the head of their industry group for many years. But she, I think, is respected across the basin, the Colorado River Basin, as someone who understands ag, understands water, and doesn't bring some of the baggage that the original nominee brought, Mr. Cook from Central Arizona Project. We're continuing to track a number of federal policy initiatives, including permitting reform, some Western water legislation, Endangered Species Act rulemaking. All of this is listed in your memo. And I think that the Bureau's work on the interstate issues and the NEPA process itself will occupy a lot of the oxygen in the room on our issues, take up a lot of that.
So we're continuing to work. I will note that we continue to work with John Bezdek. You all approved a contract extension for him earlier this year. We are not working with the Ferguson Group on federal advocacy right now. We're taking a breather and trying to figure out what our next steps are by way of contract consultants in BC. So any questions on federal?
Did we get a BLM person appointed to Colorado yet and on the federal level?
There is an acting state director that I believe, or a deputy state director that's in place.
And did we get a federal BLM person appointed? Because I don't know if that's been done either.
Yeah, Pierce.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pierce.
I know there were several in limbo. So.
We do have, I will note at the BLM level, we've got some really good career staff in the field offices here in Colorado that have been helpful when I run into issues, especially here in the Colorado River Valley field office.
I speak very highly of the White River Field Office too. They're very good at what they do.
All right, moving on. At the April board meeting, there were a few directors that raised the question of whether the River District should develop a policy specifically addressing data centers and their associated water demands. You'll remember that, and I don't have the bill number in front of me, I apologize, but this board opposed the data center tax incentive bill that came to the state legislature this year, along with a handful of other folks. And I think my candid comments to you were, these guys need to read the room. You know, we're in the middle of a budget crisis and they're asking for handouts to build these things on the Front Range and on the West Slope. And that I think was at the core of this board's rationale for opposing it, was that it wasn't appropriate for us to be giving tax incentives to data center developers in the state. And I don't think that this board's opposition and going back in and listening to those meetings was focused on land use or trying to impose our land use views on Front Range counties or even West Slope counties. So staff, went back and reviewed the last couple of conversations that this board has had. We did a thorough review of our existing policies. Rather than starting from scratch, we reviewed those policies to determine whether our existing, I think, robust set of policies already provide guidance on the water resource issues presented by data center development. I think staff's conclusion is that they do. None of our policies specifically mention data centers by name. Many address, though, the underlying issues that large load developments raise, be it water supply, conservation, trans mountain diversions, compact risk, agricultural water protection, or just the efficient use of our limited water supplies in the state. So in your packet, I included a memo that pointed to your existing policies in the areas where we believe that that we as staff can see direction from this board on issues pertaining to data centers. I have a printout of those if the board would like to see those. But let me get to them. Why don't I just pass these around, so if you don't mind. The recommendation by staff not to develop a new standalone policy on data centers is not to ignore the issue. I'll say that first. It's to rely on the strong policy framework that the board has already adopted, while remaining prepared to revisit the question if future development or legislation or other things warrant additional guidance. So in the printout that's circulating, I just went through and highlighted where I had reviewed the policies and found insight or things that I think that we as staff could rely on if and when the question of data centers, be it in the district or on the Front Range, may arise. I will note that this board has traditionally stayed out and stayed away of land use decisions. We've left that to local communities and counties. But as it relates to the resource expansion of resource demands, I think that is an area where we can weigh in. And I think that's one specific area where our policies provide that guidance. I think in the first is Trans Mountain diversions. I think the first three that are the most applicable policies are TMD policy, Colorado Water Plan, and the Colorado River Compacts and Entitlements. I think ag water use, speculation in water resources, and prior appropriation also provide some guidance for staff, but maybe a little more indirectly. In the TMD policy statement, we just recently updated and adopted language that says, or that directly opposes new or expanded TMD to supply new front range growth in a way that negatively impacts our communities. I think that is one of the first things. I think paragraphs 2 through 5 in that policy statement on Trans Mountain diversions also are helpful. Refer to IBC conceptual framework compliance, full mitigation, efficient use and reuse to extinction, and deference to basin of origin community. Within the second policy in that packet, the Colorado Water Plan, I think it requires recognition of consequences of overdevelopment of our limited Colorado River supplies and Colorado River Compact entitlements. Those Trans Mountain diversion bullets within the Colorado Water Plan also help in that it calls for TMD source watershed impacts to be detailed, stronger conservation for TMD reliant communities, and recognition of local land use in 1041's now authorities here. I'm happy to keep going. Why don't I stop and see if there are questions as you look through that printout and some of the highlighted areas. But right now, staff's recommendation is that we don't need a standalone policy on data centers. I know there was a desire by some board members for staff to move in that direction, but when I went back and listened to the conversation, there was no motion. It was a little bit gray. So I want to take this opportunity to have a conversation with the board, and if you feel like we're headed in the wrong direction, you want us to go back and write a new policy, that's up to you. But for now, I wanted to present, I guess, the body of evidence that exists within our current policies.
Have you got any comments? Gary?
I think that's the right approach, and let's just monitor and see how these data center things play out. If it becomes a bigger problem, I guess we can always backtrack.
Tom?
Yeah, I think that's the right approach, and I think in the 20 years I've been on this board, we've studiously tried to stay out of local land use planning issues because it's divisive. We have different perspectives in the counties, and that's things that the counties themselves can take positions on. So I think that's what we're doing, is a little bit of a hybrid in there that allows, as Gary said, some relook at it if something comes up specifically. That's where I'm at.
Any other comments? So it'd be the board's wishes that we don't need to make a new policy, that will stand on these policies. Okay? I think we need to make a motion or anything. It's just gonna be, these are the policies that we are using today, and these will be the policies that we use in the future. Okay?
That's the direction I needed. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think we can rely on the existing policies for initial review and advice to you on the data center bills that we expect next legislative session. I think CCI and a handful of the Colorado Municipal League and others will continue to be engaged in this issue, and we'll monitor and pay attention to what they're putting out. And if things change, we'll let you know. And if you all as a board decide that at some point we need to do more, then you let us know.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, the next item on the agenda and the last substantive item is the water marketing program update. I'm going to try to cover this, but both Audrey and Jason are available for questions if there are any concerns about it. Back in the mid-2000s, the district led an effort to fully contract the remaining contractable water in Rudine. We ended up, there were roughly, I think 4,683.5 acre feet of water that our local constituents did not want to contract for at that time. And this board made the decision to go ahead and buy that water, contract for that water, did so with our capital fund assets as cash. It has been sitting in the capital fund, and it is sitting in the capital fund at this time. It's an asset of the district. The acquisition price was somewhere in the $6 million range. We have found in recent years the need to utilize that water through our water marketing program, but that water marketing program is conducted through our enterprise, not through the general fund. We are not recommending that we transfer that water, the title to the water to the enterprise. But what we'd like to do is just have the board approve a license agreement so that the district can utilize that water as part of its water marketing enterprise instead of confusing mechanism where it ends up dragging the capital fund into this. It's really a business activity. This is a perfect year. We're using that water as part of our drought mitigation. Our general fund is helping pay for that, but so is the CWCB. It would just be a lot cleaner if we could have the enterprise run and operate that. We're recommending two actions, and I think you can approve both actions at once. One is that you, and this, by the way, is on page 293 of your PDF packet. We're recommending that the staff, the board license its to the Water Projects Enterprise the use of 4,683.5 acre feet of water of the Rudine Reservoir water available pursuant to contract 139D6C0101. This license, because that's what licenses are, is revocable at any time by the board. So if the board decides to do something else with this water, you can do it. And then the second recommendation is there is a small addition to the water marketing policy that would need to be changed. We talked about water that is contracted by the enterprise from Bureau of Reclamation. We're saying or legally available to the enterprise, and that's this license. So if the board is so inclined to support the staff's recommendation, we would recommend a motion that pass both recommendations.
They need to be separate motions.
No, one motion would be great.
Peter, only clarification there I would add is that the water that is legally available to market for the NFL is this water, but potentially other water resources that we from time to time get. Okay,
So moved, Director Chavez.
motion by Chavez, second by Martinez. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion passed.
Great. We have just one more item on the agenda. That's the future meetings. I know it's been mentioned several times. The workshop, budget workshop, is the 17th of September. And the seminar is the 18th. On the 17th, I want to turn it over to Shannon from the Colorado Mesa Water Center. She has a gracious invitation to board members and staff who will be down for the workshops.
Okay.
Shannon.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so the Water Center, we have a newly developed executive board, which I'm very excited about. Andy served on, as well as Kathy, Shannon, Henry. So I will be hosting a meet and greet with our board members. We won't have all of our board members there, but I'm hoping we'll have a good handful. It's a 9-member board. So it'll be at the CMU University Center, right down the hall from where your board meeting will be. From 5 to 6:30. So I hope you'll join us for drinks and appetizers.
Thanks, Shannon. Really appreciate it. Do we know if lunch is?
Donuts.
Can someone find out?
They say leftovers?
Yeah, we got leftovers. We got lots of leftovers.
I did text Haley and see if she needed any help. She didn't respond, so I'm assuming she's probably.
I believe it's a grab and go lunch as
Yeah.
planned. Does anybody, can someone go?
Somebody else grabbed it.
Oh, no, the burritos are upstairs in the fridge. I just didn't want them to go bad.
Do you want me to call her?
Okay.
We're upstairs in the
I'm on
Oh, God, my allergies are flaring.
All right, well, sir,
Well, thank you guys, all of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your attention. As you've seen all day and yesterday, today, what we're doing is critical importance. And your communities, I'm sure, are thanking you for what you do and how involved you are. So take my thank yous due. I appreciate your efforts. And I don't think there's a better board than this board maybe in the Western United States, but for damn sure Colorado. Thank you very much.
and he only said the Western United States because he was thinking about how functional Congress is.
On the other side of the Mississippi, it's not for real anyway. I don't. You know, they're fairy.
All right, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you all.
All right, lunch